Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. I used to laugh at people who believed in ghosts. My mom would tell me she felt cold spots in her old house, or that she heard whispers at night, and I would roll my eyes and tell her she was scaring herself. I grew up the kind of person who liked horror movies but never flinched at them. Paranormal stuff was entertainment to me, nothing more. Old houses creaked. Graveyards were just dirt and stone. The dark was only an absence of light. That was all. That changed last fall. A friend of mine, his name was Eric, got obsessed with ghost hunting. He bought all the toys, EMF meters, cheap voice recorders, an infrared thermometer he barely knew how to use. He begged me to tag along one Friday night to some abandoned farmhouse outside Flagstaff. Locals said it was haunted, and of course the internet had a dozen bullshit stories about murders and cursed land and strange sightings. I rolled my eyes but agreed, mostly because he offered to buy me beer afterward. The farmhouse was nothing special. Caved-in roof on one side, boards nailed haphazardly across the windows, graffiti covering the walls. It smelled like piss and mold. I remember thinking it was less creepy and more depressing, a place teenagers came to spray paint dicks on the walls and scare each other with ghost stories. Eric was buzzing with excitement. He waved the EMF reader around like it meant something, set up his little recorder on a broken chair, and whispered into the dark, asking any spirits present to give us a sign. I tried not to laugh. I just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waiting for the night to end. We stayed for hours. Nothing happened. Not a single bump or whisper or flicker of light. Just dust motes and cold air blowing through cracks in the wood. Around midnight, I told him I was done. We packed up and left, and I remember teasing him about wasting a whole evening chasing shadows. He looked disappointed, but he still grinned and said, "Just wait. Sometimes the weird stuff shows up after." At the time, I thought he was full of shit. It was not until the next day that I started to rethink it. Eric had gone home with the recorder and called me the next afternoon, saying I had to hear something. I drove over, expecting him to show me some random static he thought was a ghost voice, but when he hit play, I swear to God my blood went cold. It was my voice, faint and distant, asking, "Is anyone here?" And then, right after, a low, rasping whisper replied, "You took me home." I laughed at first, told him it was interference or some sick joke. He swore up and down that he had not touched the file. I played it back a dozen times, waiting for it to sound fake, but every time that whisper sent a shiver through me, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was bad audio, maybe even some creep hiding in the house we had not noticed, but deep down, something about it felt wrong. When I left his place, I tried not to think about it. But the next week, little things began happening in my apartment. I live alone, just me and my cat, so I notice when things are out of place. My cat, who usually slept at the foot of my bed, started refusing to even go in the bedroom. He would sit at the doorway, tail puffed up, growling low at something I could not see. At first I thought maybe he was spooked by mice or some other animal. But then doors I knew I had shut were left open. The bathroom light would be on in the middle of the night. And every morning, without fail, my blankets were half pulled down, bunched at the foot of the bed. I told myself I was doing it in my sleep, but it did not feel like that. It felt deliberate. Then came the scratching. The first time I heard it, I was almost asleep. A faint noise, soft and irregular, coming from beneath the mattress. I told myself it was just the cat, but when I called for him, I saw him perched on the dresser, staring at the bed with wide eyes. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, like fingernails clawing against wood. I froze, staring at the ceiling, every muscle locked. My heart thudded in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, the noise stopped. I lay there until morning, refusing to move, too terrified to look. The next night, It happened again. This time, I grabbed my phone and leaned over the edge of the bed, shining the flashlight underneath. And that was the first time I saw it. Two pale hands gripping the floorboards, long, thin arms stretching out, joints bent at impossible angles, skin stretched tight like wax paper. I remember the way my stomach dropped, how I nearly dropped the phone. Then its head emerged. Slowly, unnervingly slow, it turned toward me. The eyes were black and reflective, like an animal's at night. And then it smiled, teeth jagged and gray, too many for its mouth. I scrambled for the light switch, slammed it on. When I looked back, the space under the bed was empty. Just dust and darkness. I did not sleep at all that night. Every shadow felt like it was about to crawl out and grab me. The next day at work, I was a wreck. I told Eric about it, half joking, half desperate for him to tell me I was imagining things. He looked at me seriously, then said, "Maybe it followed you." "Who? Fuck you," I snapped. But deep down, I believed him. That was the start of it. From then on, I heard the breathing, heavy, guttural breathing, inches from the floorboards. Sometimes I saw fingers curling around the edge of the bed frame. Other times, nothing at all, just the feeling that I was being watched, that if I let my guard down for even a second, it would crawl all the way out. I am not afraid of graveyards anymore. I am not afraid of the dark, but I am afraid of my own bed, because every time I close my eyes, I hear it whispering again in that rasping voice. You took me home. The first few days after I saw it were a blur. I kept telling myself that it had to be sleep deprivation or maybe even some fucked up dream bleeding into reality. I tried to explain it away as stress, or that maybe I had been half awake and imagined the whole thing. But every time I looked at my bed, I felt that same prickling dread crawl up my spine. My cat still refused to enter the room, and that told me all I needed to know. Animals know when something is wrong. I started sleeping on the couch, but that did not help much. The apartment is small, and the bedroom is right down the hall. I could still hear the sounds. The soft dragging, like fingers on wood, and then sometimes a low groan, almost like breathing. One night I woke up around 3 in the morning and realized I was hearing the same scratching again. It was faint, muffled by the closed door, but it was still there. And the fucked up part was that it was not coming from under the bed this time. It sounded like it was inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the drywall and felt my stomach twist. There it was, that slow scrape of nails against the inside of the wall, traveling from one end to the other, like something crawling around inside. I pulled away and sat there with my back against the couch, trying not to cry. The sound finally faded around dawn, but I did not sleep at all after that. Work became impossible. I would show up looking like hell, shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep. People started asking questions. One co-worker joked that I looked like I was on drugs. I snapped at him and stormed out. I could not explain it. How do you tell someone that something crawled out from under your bed and now it follows you around your apartment? They would lock me up. Eric was the only person I trusted with it, but even he looked uneasy when I told him. He kept repeating that he had not heard the whisper on his recording, only silence, which made me even more paranoid. Whatever this thing was, it had chosen me. Out of everyone in that shitty old farmhouse, it picked me to latch onto. The second week after it started, I woke to find my blankets pulled completely off the bed and lying neatly folded in the middle of the floor. That shook me more than the scratching ever had. Folding is deliberate. Folding means thought. I stood there staring at the pile for 10 minutes before grabbing the blankets and throwing them into the closet. I could not bring myself to touch them again. I slept under an old hoodie that night, shivering, afraid of even my own sheets. Then came the night I actually saw it again. I was lying on the couch with every light in the apartment blazing. I told myself that if it showed up, I would at least see it coming this time. At some point my eyes drooped, and I must have dozed off. I woke suddenly to the sound of breathing. Not faint this time, not muffled. It was deep and heavy, like someone standing right over me. I opened my eyes just enough to see. It was crouched at the end of the couch, long arms folded like a praying mantis, black eyes locked on me. Its head tilted slowly, as if studying me, and then it smiled again, that horrible gray grin. I bolted upright, heart slamming, and it vanished. Just gone. The space where it had been was empty. I checked every corner of the apartment, every closet, under every piece of furniture. Nothing. But I could still feel it. That weight of being watched, pressing in on me no matter where I stood. I did not go to work the next day. I called in sick and stayed home with the curtains drawn. My phone buzzed a few times, but I ignored it. I just sat at the table, staring at the bedroom door, waiting for the next sound. Around noon, I heard a faint thump from inside the room. I thought about opening the door, then thought better of it. I was not going to give that thing the satisfaction. The thumps continued every few hours, sometimes soft, sometimes loud enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I tried drowning it out with music, but even then I could feel the vibrations through the floor. My cat hid under the kitchen cabinets, refusing to come out. I envied him. By the third week, it stopped being only at night. I would catch glimpses during the day, too. A pale hand curling around the bathroom door frame, a shadow stretched too long across the hallway floor. Once, while brushing my teeth, I looked into the mirror and swore I saw it standing behind me, not in the reflection in the room. I spun around, toothpaste foaming at my mouth, and of course there was nothing there. I started talking to it without realizing, muttering under my breath, telling it to fuck off, to leave me alone, sometimes begging, sometimes making threats I knew I could not carry out. I thought maybe if it heard me, it would know I was not afraid. But that was a lie. I was terrified every second. Then came the whisper. I had just laid down on the couch again, eyes wide, waiting for the scratching to start. Instead, I felt warm breath against my ear, close, impossibly close. And that same rasping voice I had heard on the recorder spoke, clear as day. "You brought me here." I jumped up, swinging blindly at the air, shouting until my throat went raw. The neighbors pounded on the wall, yelling at me to shut up, but I could not stop. I screamed until I collapsed on the floor, shaking, tears streaming down my face. When I finally calmed down, I realized my phone was buzzing again. Eric had texted me. Just one line. "Do you hear it too?" I stared at the words, heart hammering. He had never admitted to hearing the voice before. He told me his recorder picked up nothing, but now he was asking if I heard it too, which meant he heard it as well. I typed back, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He replied almost instantly, "Last night, I heard it whisper." But it did not say the same thing. I asked what it had said. His answer made my skin crawl. It said, "He is mine now." I did not answer Eric right away. I just stared at his message, my hands trembling so badly that I almost dropped the phone. He had insisted from the start that he never heard the whisper on his recorder, that it was only me. Now, weeks later, he suddenly admitted that it had spoken to him too. And not just spoken, but claimed me. I wanted to call him, to demand answers, but I could not make myself hit dial. My throat was tight, my chest heavy, like saying the words out loud would make them real. Instead, I paced the apartment, muttering to myself, trying to piece it all together. It was with me, I knew that much. But why had it started talking to Eric? And why would it tell him I belonged to it? That night I did not even pretend to sleep. I left every light on and sat in the kitchen with a knife on the table, drinking coffee until my stomach hurt. The apartment was too quiet, too still. I found myself almost begging for the scratching to come back, because silence meant it could be anywhere. Around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Eric. "It is standing at the foot of my bed." I froze. My eyes locked on the screen, reading the words over and over. I typed back without thinking. "Do not move. Do not look at it." His reply came instantly. It is smiling. My heart slammed against my ribs. I typed again, fingers shaking. Eric, get out of there. No response. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at my phone, willing it to light up with a new message, a call, anything, but it stayed dark. Finally, just as the sky outside began to pale with early morning light, my phone buzzed. It was a photo. Eric's bedroom, dim and grainy. He was lying in bed, sheets pulled to his chest, eyes wide and terrified. And at the foot of the bed stood the thing. Tall, pale, head cocked at a sick angle, those black eyes gleaming even in the dark. Its hand rested on Eric's ankle like it was claiming him. I dropped the phone so fast it clattered across the table. My stomach lurched, and I barely made it to the sink before I vomited. When I finally picked the phone back up, the photo was gone, deleted. No record of it in my gallery, no trace in the messages. If I had not still been shaking, I might have convinced myself I imagined it. I drove to Eric's place later that day, even though every instinct told me not to. His car was in the driveway, his curtains drawn tight. I knocked until my knuckles hurt. No answer. I called his name, my voice cracking. Finally, the door opened a few inches. Eric stood there, pale and hollow-eyed, like he had not slept in weeks. "Do not come in," he said, voice hoarse. I tried to argue, but he shook his head violently. "It is in here. It will see you. Just go." Before I could say anything else, he slammed the door shut. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence inside, before finally walking away. That night, back in my apartment, the scratching returned, louder this time, not from under the bed, not from the walls, but from inside the mattress itself. Like it had crawled into the springs and was tearing its way out. I stood in the hallway staring at the bed, knife clutched in my hand, whispering, "Fuck this, fuck this, fuck this." The mattress shuddered. Not just a sound, but movement, the whole frame rocking as if something was thrashing beneath the surface. I bolted, slamming the bedroom door shut and pressing my back against it. My cat yowled from the kitchen, claws skittering against the tile. The shaking stopped after a few minutes, but I did not open that door again until morning. When I finally did, the mattress was perfectly still, but the sheets had been pulled tight, smoothed flat, like someone had made the bed for me. On the pillow sat a scrap of paper, yellowed and brittle. 3 words written in shaky handwriting. "You are mine." I burned the paper in the sink, but the smell clung to my hands all day, acrid and sour. I stopped going to work completely. My boss left a voicemail saying if I did not show up, I was fired. I deleted it. Work did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except surviving the nights. I tried leaving town, packed a bag, threw it in the car, and started driving without a plan. By the time I hit the highway, I felt lighter, almost relieved, like maybe it would not follow me past the city limits. That hope lasted less than an hour. At a gas station outside Winslow, I stopped for coffee. I went into the bathroom to wash my face, and when I looked up into the mirror, my stomach dropped. Behind me, in the reflection, it stood at the edge of the parking lot, pale and still, head tilted, black eyes fixed on me. I spun around, heart hammering. The lot was empty. No one there. I drove back home. That night, I dreamed of the farmhouse, the walls sagging, the floor covered in dust, Eric crouched in the corner with his recorder. Only this time, I was the one whispering, my voice rasping and low, saying, "You brought me here." I woke drenched in sweat, gasping. The clock read 3:17, the exact same time the scratching always started. Sure enough, a moment later, I heard it. Not under the bed, not in the walls, not in the mattress. This time it came from the ceiling. A dragging, scraping sound moving across the plaster above me, circling slowly. I pressed my face into my hands and whispered, "Why me? What the fuck do you want from me?" The answer came instantly, not from the ceiling, from right beside my ear, because you let me in. I did not move after hearing that voice. I sat there on the couch, palms pressed against my ears, rocking like a child, telling myself I had imagined it. But it had been too close, too real, the warmth of breath on my skin undeniable. I could not pretend anymore that it was just scratching in the dark or tricks of exhaustion. It was here with me, awake when I was awake, waiting when I tried to sleep. For the first time, I felt like it wanted to be acknowledged, like all the small sounds and glimpses were a prelude, and now it was speaking clearly because it knew I could not ignore it any longer. The following day, I stayed out of the apartment as long as I could. I drove around aimlessly, drank too much coffee at a 24-hour diner, walked the aisles of a Walmart until employees started giving me side glances. But eventually, exhaustion pulled me back home. I told myself I would not sleep, that I would stay awake on the couch with the television blaring, but of course that did not last. When I opened my eyes again, the room was dark. I had left the lights on, I was sure of it, but now everything was shadowed. My phone said it was 3:17, that cursed minute again. I sat up, throat dry, and saw the silhouette in the corner. It had crawled fully out this time, long limbs bent at angles that made me nauseous to watch, black eyes glinting faintly in the dim glow from the streetlight outside. It did not move toward me. It only crouched, hands splayed wide on the floor, head tilting in slow jerks like a puppet with tangled strings. My instinct was to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst. I clutched the knife I kept beside me, but my hand shook so badly the blade rattled against the table. Then it spoke again. "You are mine." The words rasped like broken glass dragged over wood. The air itself felt heavier after it said them. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering prayers I had not said since childhood, promising anything to anyone listening if they would make it stop. When I opened them, the corner was empty. The next morning, the knife was gone. That day I called Eric again, desperate for answers. He sounded wrecked. His voice was hoarse, and he spoke in short bursts, like he was terrified someone else might be listening. "It will not leave," he whispered. "I burned sage. I called a priest. I even tried sleeping in my car. It does not matter. It follows." "Why us?" I asked. Silence stretched so long I thought he had hung up. Finally he said, "Maybe because we went there. Maybe because we listened." I thought about the farmhouse, about Eric setting that recorder on a broken chair. Had we invited it without realizing? Was it as simple as speaking to it, acknowledging it? Before I could ask more, Eric muttered, "It is here," and the line went dead. I drove by his place again that night. His curtains were drawn, lights off, but I could see him through the gap in the blinds. Standing in the middle of his living room, stiff as a statue, arms hanging limply at his sides. I called his name through the door, but he did not react. When I knocked harder, something moved behind him, a pale hand sliding along the wall, curling around his shoulder like it was guiding him. I ran. Back at my apartment, I felt more alone than ever. My cat was gone. He must have slipped out when I left the door open in my rush. I searched the complex with a flashlight, calling his name until my throat hurt, but he never came back. Part of me wondered if he had been taken the same way Eric was being taken, piece by piece, until nothing human remained. That night, I refused to lie down. I sat cross-legged on the couch with every light burning, knife replaced by a hammer I found in the closet. Around 3:17, the lights flickered and dimmed until only the weakest glow remained. The scratching started again, not beneath the bed this time, but directly under the couch where I Saturday. The sound was deafening, wood splintering, nails tearing. I jumped up just as the cushions dipped inward, as if something massive pressed against them from below. The hammer shook in my hand. I wanted to swing, to smash the cushions until nothing remained, but fear rooted me in place. Then the voice came again. "You brought me here." I screamed back, I did not fucking bring you anywhere. My voice cracked, raw with terror. Get the fuck out. Leave me alone. The scratching stopped. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. For a moment, I thought I had won. Then, slowly, the hammer lifted out of my hand. It hovered for a split second before clattering to the floor. My hands were empty, and I had not let go. I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table, landing hard on my spine. The figure rose from behind the couch, taller than before, its limbs stretching impossibly long, spine bending until its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Its eyes glowed faintly now, not just reflecting light but producing it, dim and cold. It leaned forward, joints creaking, and pressed its face close to mine. I could smell it, damp and metallic, like rust mixed with rot. Its jagged teeth spread into a grin so wide I thought its face might split in half. "You are mine." I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. Behind me, I heard the floor creak as it followed, slow and deliberate. By the time I wrenched the door open and spilled into the hallway, the air felt lighter, and when I dared to look back, my apartment was empty. I drove until dawn with no destination, parking finally at a rest stop an hour outside town. I slept sitting upright in the driver's seat, clutching the hammer like a lifeline. When I woke, there was something in the passenger seat. A folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. 3 words written in the same shaky handwriting I had burned before. "You are mine." I stared at that paper on the passenger seat for what felt like an hour. My chest ached, and I kept whispering to myself that it was just a trick, just my mind filling in the blanks, but deep down I knew it was real. The same handwriting, the same brittle paper. I had burned the last one in my sink, watched it curl and blacken into nothing, yet here it was again, as if nothing could destroy it. I picked it up carefully, half expecting it to crumble in my fingers, but it held together. I read those words over and over until they blurred, then shoved the paper into the glove box and slammed it shut. I told myself I would throw it out the next time I stopped, but part of me knew it would only come back. Driving home felt like admitting defeat, but where the hell else was I supposed to go? I had no family nearby, no money to disappear somewhere new, and no one who would believe me if I tried to explain. Every option felt like it circled back to the same place. That shitty apartment with the bed I no longer slept in, and the couch that dipped at 3:17 every night. I did not unlock the front door right away. I stood in the hallway, listening, waiting for some sign of it. Nothing, just silence. I stepped inside, gripping the hammer tight, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The apartment smelled different. Damp, metallic, faintly rotten, the same smell that came off its breath when it leaned close to me. I gagged and covered my nose, pushing deeper inside. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I could feel the wrongness clinging to the air. I checked the bedroom, expecting the mattress to be torn open, but it looked untouched. The blankets I had abandoned were still crumpled in the closet where I had thrown them. The only change was on the wall above the bed. 3 long scratches carved deep into the paint, like claws dragged down from the ceiling to the floor. I backed out of the room and shut the door. That night, I tried something new. I left the apartment entirely and sat in my car in the parking lot. I told myself that if it was tied to the apartment, it would not follow me out here. I cracked the windows, leaned back in the seat, and forced my eyes shut. When I woke, it was to a soft tapping on the glass. I froze, eyes still closed, pulse racing. The tapping came again, deliberate and steady, like someone knocking with a fingernail. I opened my eyes. It was crouched just outside the car, its pale face pressed against the window, teeth bared in a grin, black eyes inches from mine, unblinking. I screamed and scrambled out the other side, falling hard on the asphalt. When I looked back, the car was empty, no one there. The windows were fogged with my own breath, nothing else. I did not go back inside the car. I ran up the stairs and locked myself in the apartment, Shaking so badly I dropped the hammer twice. I did not even try to sleep. I sat at the table with every light on, whispering over and over that I could not do this anymore. By morning, I felt like my mind was unraveling. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was stretching too long. I could not tell what was real anymore. I tried calling Eric again, desperate for someone to share this with, but his phone went straight to voicemail. 2 hours later, I got a text from an unknown number, a picture of me, sitting at my own kitchen table, head in my hands, taken from only a few feet away. I dropped the phone and staggered back. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely breathe. I checked every door, every window, locked, secure. But the photo was real. Someone had been here. Or maybe not someone. Maybe it never needed locks to keep it out. That night I tried another hotel, one I had never stayed at before. I checked in under cash, gave no real information, and dragged a chair against the door. I left the bathroom light on, sat on the bed, and stared at the blank television screen. At 3:17, the screen flickered. Static poured across it for a moment, then cleared into a grainy black and white image. My apartment bedroom. I saw the bed, the blankets still in the closet, the scratches on the wall, and then I saw it, crawling slowly out from under the bed, limbs bending wrong, head turning in jerks. It stared into the camera, into me, and smiled. The television went black. I ripped the cord from the wall and threw the remote across the room. I pressed myself against the far corner, shaking, muttering every prayer I could remember. At dawn, I left the hotel without checking out, just walked out the lobby door and drove until my hands cramped on the steering wheel. Everywhere I went it followed. Gas stations, diners, even walking through a crowded store. I would glance up and catch sight of a pale figure at the end of an aisle, head tilted, eyes locked on me. When I blinked, it was gone, but the dread never left. By the 5th week, I could not deny it anymore. This thing was not tied to a place, it was tied to me, and worse, it was getting stronger. It no longer needed the scratching to announce itself, no longer needed shadows or half glimpses. It was standing in front of me, watching, smiling, waiting. I started drinking to knock myself out. It worked for a few nights, or at least I thought it did. But even drunk, even passed out on the couch, I woke at 3:17 to find myself sitting upright with no memory of moving. The hammer was gone again, replaced with another brittle scrap of paper on my lap. 3 words: "You are mine." This time, when I burned it, the flames hissed like wet wood, and the smell was unbearable. My smoke alarm went off, but I did not care. I wanted it gone. I wanted all of this gone. The neighbors started avoiding me. They whispered in the hallway, eyes sliding past me like I was already dead. I could not blame them. I looked like hell. I smelled like smoke and fear. I called Eric one last time, begging him to answer, and this time he did. His voice was barely audible, a rasping whisper like he had been hollowed out. "It does not stop," he said. "You cannot get rid of it. The more you fight, the closer it gets. The only way is to give in." I shouted at him, demanded to know what that meant, but he only laughed, a dry, broken laugh that made my skin crawl. "It wants you," he whispered. "It has always wanted you." The line went dead. That night I did not sleep at all. I sat on the floor with every light burning and the hammer clutched tight. The apartment was silent, too silent, and the silence felt worse than the scratching ever had. At 3:17 the lights went out. When the lights died, the silence broke. The scratching started again, only this time it was not coming from under the bed or the couch. It was everywhere at once, crawling through the walls, shivering through the floorboards, humming in the air vents. I pressed my back against the wall, hammer tight in my hand, but the truth hit me like a fist in the chest. There was no place to swing. It was already inside every inch of this place, and maybe inside me too. I shouted into the dark, throat raw, "What the fuck do you want from me?" My voice bounced back empty, no echo, as if the apartment itself swallowed the sound. Then it answered, You. That one word rattled the glass in the windows. The hammer slipped in my sweaty hands. I felt small, pathetic, like a kid lost in a storm. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. I wanted to fight, but there was nothing solid to hit. All I could do was stand there, panting like an animal, waiting for it to show itself. And it did. The corner of the room rippled like water. Out of it came a hand, long and pale, fingers bending back too far. Then the other hand, dragging its body out with jerks and snaps, as if bones cracked with every movement. Its head tilted, black eyes flashing in the dark. That grin again, stretching wider than a human mouth could manage. It pulled itself fully into the room, towering over me, limbs scraping against the ceiling. I smelled that same rot, metallic and damp, thick in my throat until I gagged. "You cannot fucking have me," I said, raising the hammer. It laughed, not loud but low, like air leaking from a coffin. It crouched, lowering itself until its face was only inches from mine. My arms shook, hammer raised, but I could not bring myself to swing. Its presence pressed against me like a weight, pinning me without touching me. It whispered again, that rasping, broken glass voice. "You brought me here. You are mine." And in that moment, I understood something. Fighting it, running from it, even screaming at it, all of it fed the thing. Every time I resisted, it got stronger. It wanted me terrified, thrashing, hopeless. Eric had tried to tell me, but I had not listened. So I dropped the hammer. The metal clanged against the floor, sharp and final. The grin faltered for the first time. I said, steady as I could manage, "Fine, take me, but you leave everyone else the fuck alone." For a long moment, nothing moved. Its head cocked to the side, studying me like a specimen. Then it leaned closer, close enough that the cold of it sank into my skin. Its jagged teeth grazed my ear as it whispered, "Mine." And just like that, the lights snapped back on. The thing was gone. No scraping, no scratching, no smell. Just me, alone in the apartment, hammer lying useless on the floor. I stood there shaking, waiting for it to return, but nothing happened. Days passed, then a week. For the first time since the farmhouse, I slept through the night. No 317 scratching, no whispers, no pale hands reaching out. My cat even came back, thin and trembling, but alive. It was like the nightmare had lifted, but something had changed. I caught myself in the mirror one morning, brushing my teeth, and froze. My eyes looked darker, not in color but in depth, like they were reflecting something they should not. When I leaned closer, the reflection smiled before I did. The paper showed up again, too, not on the passenger seat or the kitchen table this time. It was tucked neatly under my pillow, brittle and yellowed, 3 words scrawled in the same shaky hand: "You are mine." I burned it again, and again it refused to turn to ash. The flames hissed, then sputtered out, leaving the paper untouched. I buried it in the dumpster behind the building. The next morning, it was back on my nightstand. And still, the scratching has not returned. The thing no longer crawls out from under my bed, no longer presses its face to the glass, because it does not need to. I feel it when I close my eyes, sitting just behind me, watching, not separate anymore, but stitched into me. I dream of crawling through walls, of sliding under beds, of grinning down at terrified strangers. I wake up with my fingers aching like they have been clawing wood all night. Eric does not answer calls anymore. I do not know if he gave in the same way I did or if he is gone entirely. I have not seen him, not at work, not in town, not anywhere. Sometimes I wonder if I will run into him in a crowd and recognize the same darkness sitting just under his skin. But here is the truth I cannot ignore. I am not scared anymore. I should be, but I am not. The fear has burned out, hollowed me, left only something calm and cold in its place. The thing got what it wanted. And when I lie in bed now, I do not hear scratching. I hear breathing, my own, but doubled, in and out, in perfect rhythm with me. I know what that means. I am not waiting for it to crawl out anymore. It is not under the bed. It is not outside the door. It is inside, and it will never leave. Okay, I don't really know how to start this, but it's been eating at me for weeks, and writing it out is the only thing that feels halfway sane. I'm not claiming this is paranormal or anything. I don't even know what this is, but it happened. It's still happening, I think. I live in Manchester, Rusholme, specifically, and I work late shifts at this cafe near the city center, off Portland Street. Small place, nothing fancy. We close around 7 most nights. My shifts are usually afternoon till close, which means I'm the one locking up while the city's just starting to wind down. There's a lot of foot traffic during the day, but in the evenings it gets quieter. Still safe enough, though. You get your usual people hanging around, delivery drivers, office folks, uni students, a few regulars who linger on their phones a bit too long. It never bothered me. Until I noticed the car. It was just a silver Peugeot, I think a 307. I'm not great with models, but it was one of those older ones with slightly fogged out headlights and a dent near the back wheel. The first time I noticed it, I didn't think much of it. It was parked directly across from the cafe. Nothing weird, just sitting there, engine off, windows up. No one got out. I assumed someone was waiting for a partner, or maybe just finishing a phone call. That's normal. We're right by a pharmacy and 2 takeaways people idle there all the time. But then I noticed it again the next night. Same car, same spot, same time. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe someone lived nearby. Maybe it was coincidence. But by the 4th night in a row, it was getting harder to pretend I wasn't clocking it. And then, after the 5th night, I decided to test it. I left through the back entrance, cut through the side alley, and looped around on foot to the main road. I stood behind a lamppost across the street and watched. The car was still there, headlights off, but I could just make out a silhouette in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting. I stood there for 10 minutes, no movement, no one got out. Eventually I gave up and walked home, trying to tell myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting some podcast I'd listened to onto a tired commuter. I didn't see it again that week. I figured that was the end of it. Until the following Tuesday. I went to my gym after work. It's about 20 minutes away in Salford. Tiny place above a chemist's, nothing fancy. I got out around 9:30, and there it was. Same silver car. Parked just a bit down from the entrance. Windows fogged up from the cold. Headlights off. I didn't see the person inside until I was directly across from it. He didn't move. Didn't turn his head. But I knew he saw me. You know when you just feel someone looking right at you, that heavy pressure on your back. I kept walking, didn't even glance directly at the car, just went around the corner and stood behind a skip until I was sure I wasn't being followed. I don't know why I didn't call anyone. I guess I didn't want to sound dramatic. What was I going to say? There's a car that keeps appearing wherever I go. It sounded unhinged even in my own head. Plus, no one had actually done anything. It got worse when I saw it outside my flat. Rusholme's a busy area, loads of parking turnover. I usually have to leave my car 2 or 3 streets away. But that night, I came home from a late Tesco run, and there it was parked directly across from my building's front door. Same dent, same shape. I stood there with my shopping bag, staring at it like an idiot. Still, no movement, no lights, no sound. Just presence. I texted my sister, told her I was feeling weird, didn't mention the car. She offered to let me stay the night at hers, but I brushed it off, said I was just overtired. I barely slept. The next time I saw the car was somewhere it definitely shouldn't have been. My sister's wedding. It was a small venue out in Cheshire, countryside vibes, private access. No public parking nearby, all guests had to be on a list for the reception. It had been a long day. My nerves were already fried, and I'd just stepped outside to get some air when I saw it. Parked at the edge of the lot, slightly hidden behind a tall hedge, silver Peugeot, same weird dent, same off-kilter alignment of the back wheel. I don't remember walking toward it, but I did. I got close enough to see that the inside was empty this time, no driver, but the driver's seat was reclined all the way back, like someone had just been lying there. I turned and walked straight to the event manager and asked her if she had the guest list for vehicles. She said she did. I asked if a silver Peugeot was on it. It wasn't. I told her it didn't belong to anyone, and someone came out to check. By the time we got back to the lot, less than 5 minutes, the car was gone. I didn't say anything to my sister. I didn't want to ruin her day, but something shifted for me that night. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. This car was following me, but not in the way you see in movies, not tailing me down streets or chasing me through alleyways. It just appeared, always still, always watching. I decided to go to the police. They were polite but predictably unhelpful. I gave them everything: make, color, rough plate numbers. They took it all down, said they'd look into it, probably just a misunderstanding. Someone with a similar routine, maybe an ex I'd forgotten to mention. But the next day, an officer called me back. And this is when things tipped from unnerving to downright wrong. He said the plate matched a vehicle that had been declared scrapped 6 months ago, totaled in a collision, written off, no insurance, officially destroyed. The scrapyard logs even had a receipt and timestamp. But that car, the same car, was still appearing wherever I went. I told the officer that, and he got quiet. Said they'd look into it again. I haven't heard back. The final straw happened 2 nights ago. I was walking to my car, parked just off Wilmslow Road. It was late, cold, light drizzle. I opened the door, got in, and something fluttered on my windscreen. A note, folded, plain paper, no envelope. It read, "I liked the blue dress better. Tomorrow you'll wear it again." No name, no handwriting I recognized, nothing else. And I had worn a blue dress 2 nights earlier. Once, briefly, to a birthday party I barely mentioned to anyone. I didn't tell anyone about the note until now. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's a stalker or something else entirely. But the silver car is real. The man, whoever he is, he's watching. And now he knows what I'm going to wear tomorrow. I'm scared to find out what happens if I don't. I didn't wear the dress. I thought about it, stared at it hanging on the back of my wardrobe door for a long time the next morning. Blue, simple, a bit wrinkled. I'd worn it to a friend's birthday at a pub in Didsbury. Nothing fancy. I almost forgot I owned it. But the note had changed everything. I couldn't wear it. Not after that. It felt like giving permission. I wore jeans and a hoodie instead, kept my hair up in a bun, no makeup, left the house around 11, later than usual, made sure I walked in a different direction to get to the bus stop. I didn't want to drive, didn't want to risk going back to the car and finding something else waiting for me under the wiper. The whole way into town I kept checking behind me. Every corner, every crossing, nothing. Just other people doing their normal routines. But that was the thing, wasn't it? Whoever this was, if it was a person, they didn't act like someone out for attention. They weren't trying to scare me in the open. It was all quiet, intentional, measured. By the time I got to the cafe, I was already exhausted. I didn't mention the note to anyone at work. I wanted to badly, but how do you bring something like that up? Oh, by the way, someone might be stalking me and possibly knows where I live, what I wear, and who I talk to. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue in a break room conversation. Around 4 p.m., I started feeling this tightness in my chest. Not a full-blown panic attack, I've had those. I know what they feel like, but more like a weight. Like I was being pushed toward a moment I couldn't name yet, a slow, thick dread. I kept glancing out the front window between customers. The view of the street wasn't perfect, buses blocking parts of the curb, people stopping to check their phones, but I kept looking anyway. At 6:47, the silver car was there. Right across the road, same spot as the first time I ever noticed it, parked parallel to the cafe's big window, as if it had never moved. I didn't even see it arrive. It was just there. I couldn't see the driver, not clearly. The windows were tinted, and it was dark out, but I swear there was someone sitting behind the wheel, not moving, no phone out, no radio glare. I must have frozen for a full minute. I heard Gemma behind me, she was doing the till, ask if I was all right. I mumbled something about being tired and stepped into the back, hands shaking. I tried to call the police again. They didn't answer, or rather, they did, but it was a switchboard. I was on hold for almost 10 minutes, and by the time someone picked up, I was already spiraling into this weird mental loop where I doubted everything. What if it's not the same car? What if I'm just seeing what I'm afraid to see? What if someone I know is messing with me? But then, the note. That wasn't imagined. It was real, tucked under my wiper blade like a warning wrapped in politeness. The officer who finally came on the line was kind. She listened, took my details again. I asked if anyone had followed up on the registration number. She went quiet for a second, then said, "It's still listed as scrapped. There shouldn't be a vehicle matching that description on the road." I asked if it could be cloned plates, someone using the number from a destroyed car to avoid tracking. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She just told me to keep a record, write things down, take pictures if I felt safe doing so, and not to approach the vehicle, as if I wanted to get close to it. I hung up, told Gemma I had a headache and needed to leave a bit early. She was sweet about it, said she'd finish the close. I left through the front, but took a wide route around the car, pretended to be on my phone, didn't look directly at the windows, just enough of a glance to confirm, yeah. There was definitely someone inside. pale face, maybe male, sitting too still. I walked 5 blocks out of my way before calling an Uber. I was halfway home when I realized what scared me most wasn't the fact the car was still following me. It was that I hadn't seen it following me. No movement, no sound. It was just always where I was about to be. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with the curtains half drawn and the kitchen light on. Every 30 minutes, I peeked out the window. At 3:12 a.m., I saw it again. Parked on the opposite side of the road, no headlights, no interior light, just a dull reflection of the street lamp in its windshield. I took a photo this time, through the glass, zoomed in. The image came out blurry, but you can make out the car, and if you squint, a pale outline behind the steering wheel. But the part that turned my stomach wasn't the photo. It was when I looked at the time stamp, 3:12 a.m. The exact time I woke up the night before from a dream I couldn't remember, only that someone had whispered my name in it. And that night, I hadn't looked out the window. What if it had been there then too? What if it always had been? I sent the photo to my sister, didn't say much, just, "Seen this car around your place?" She texted back 5 minutes later, "No, but I've seen it near Mum's." My blood ran cold. Mum lives in a retirement flat near the edge of Levenshulme. She doesn't drive anymore. Never had a reason to. I hadn't told her anything, hadn't mentioned the car, neither had my sister. But apparently, the silver Peugeot had been spotted there too. This isn't just about me anymore. Whoever's in that car, if it even is a person, they're expanding the circle. And I don't think they're watching me for fun. I think they're waiting for me to do something, or not do something. And I still haven't worn the blue dress. It started with the dress, right? The blue one. The note said I'd wear it again. I still hadn't. And maybe that was the problem. Because things started changing after that. I don't mean in the usual stalker horror movie kind of way. No broken windows, no dead pets, no heavy breathing phone calls, just little things. Small, precise shifts in my routine that I didn't make. It started on Thursday morning. I left my flat around 9, like I always do, to grab a coffee and get some air before work. I'm a creature of habit. I go to the same cafe on the corner, sit at the window seat, order a flat white, always pay cash. But that day, the barista smiled at me and said, "Back again? Twice in one morning?" I blinked. "Sorry. You just came in, like half an hour ago." I shook my head. "No, I didn't." He laughed awkwardly, like he thought I was joking. "Well, someone who looked like you did. Same jacket, even the same earrings." I laughed it off too, played along, but inside, my chest was tightening. I hadn't been there earlier. I know I hadn't. I looked around the cafe like maybe someone was still there, someone copying me, mimicking me. But the place was nearly empty, just a couple of students and an old man reading a newspaper. I tried to brush it off, went to work, didn't mention it to anyone. But then, later that night, my phone buzzed, a text from my sister. "Hey, are you still here? You left your scarf." I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "Where?" "Mum's place. You were just here like an hour ago. Had tea, remember? I hadn't been there in 3 days. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring. "What's going on?" I asked. She sounded confused. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't at Mum's today." There was a pause. "Are you messing with me?" "No, I'm serious." "Well, someone who looked exactly like you was. Same hair, same bloody laugh. Mum even said you seemed a bit quiet." My mouth went dry. "I've been at work all day," I whispered. "You sure you're okay?" I hung up. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat on the floor of my living room, back against the sofa, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional hiss of wind through the cracked window. At 2:54 a.m., a car drove past my building. I didn't see it, but I heard it. That specific engine sound low and uneven, like something not quite tuned right, and then the slow crunch of tires on gravel as it eased to a stop. I didn't move, didn't look, but my whole body was locked in place. A minute later, my phone vibrated. No number. Just a single message. "She wears it better." I didn't respond. I don't think I even breathed. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, the sun was rising and my front door was locked. I checked my closet. The blue dress was still there, but it wasn't hanging on the hook where I'd left it. It was folded neatly on my bed, like someone had laid it out for me. That morning, I called in sick to work and took a cab straight to the police station. I brought the photo I'd taken of the car, printed the texts, even brought the dress, the folded one. I didn't know what I thought they'd do with it, test it for prints, fibers, blood. The officer I spoke to was polite, but his eyes glazed over halfway through. He nodded a lot, jotted things down, gave me a leaflet about personal safety. He suggested I see someone. "As in, a therapist?" I asked, voice flat. "Well, just to talk through everything. Might help you make sense of it." "Would you say that to someone who brought in a break? In report?" He didn't answer. I left with nothing. That night, I wore the dress. I know, I shouldn't have, but I wanted to control something. It felt like I was being handled, like my own life had been put on rails, and someone else had the schedule. Wearing it felt like flipping the script, like if I wore it on my terms, it wouldn't mean what they thought it did. I went to the pub near my old uni, loud, busy, familiar, lots of bodies, lots of noise. I sat with a friend from work, didn't drink much, kept checking the window. No sign of the car, no texts, no notes. I felt okay until I went to the toilet. It was one of those grimy, mirror-lined loose where everything echoes. I was washing my hands, not really looking up, when I noticed something in the mirror behind me. A woman, standing just outside the stall area, wearing the same dress. Same cut, same color, but not mine. It fit her differently, looser at the shoulders, longer at the hem. Her hair was darker than mine, pulled back tight. I turned around fast. No one was there. I ran back out into the pub. My friend looked up like nothing had happened. I asked if she saw anyone come from the toilets. She shook her head. "You okay?" "I think someone's following me." "Do you want me to call someone?" "No," I said, suddenly unsure of who someone even was anymore. I left early, took a cab home, told myself I'd imagined it, until I walked into my flat and saw the scarf. The one I supposedly left at Mum's place, folded on my kitchen counter. My sister hadn't been by. I texted her just to check. She hadn't touched it. That night, I took a video, just one, of my front door. I set up my phone on a stack of books, hit record, and let it run while I slept, or at least while I laid still and pretended to. The next morning, I checked the footage. Nothing for the first few hours. But at 3:12 a.m., there's a flicker of movement. The sound of a key turning in the lock. The door opens. And in the doorway, just for a second, you see someone wearing the blue dress. My blue dress. Only it wasn't me, because I was already lying in bed, watching, frozen. She didn't come in. She just stood there. And then she smiled. I didn't show the video to anyone. I should have. I know that. But when you watch something like that, truly watch it, frame by frame, over and over again, it stops feeling like proof and starts feeling like a trap. Like if you show it to someone else, you're inviting them into it too. You're saying, "Here, carry this with me. Try sleeping now." So I kept it to myself. And then I deleted it. Not because I wanted to, but because something about keeping it like a cursed object felt worse than not having it at all. I'd already watched it too many times. That moment where the door unlocks, creaks open, the sound of the hinges, and then her. Standing in my doorway, wearing my dress, with my face, but not exactly my face. I couldn't explain it to myself at the time, but I know now what was wrong. She didn't blink, not once. She stood there for 16 full seconds, I counted, just looking in, eyes locked on the direction of the camera. No blinking. And then she smiled. Not in a creepy, exaggerated way, just slight, familiar, the kind of smile I'd give a friend I haven't seen in years. Then the door quietly closed again. Locked. The sound of footsteps fading down the hall. That was 3 nights ago. And since then, everything's been different. I don't mean that in a dramatic way, like the world turned upside down. I mean it in that unnerving, gut-sick way, where everything around you keeps going, but you know something's shifted. Everyone still says good morning the same way. The same adverts play on the tram. The cafe still sells the same lukewarm almond croissants, but there's a layer missing, or maybe added. Something between me and the world now, a thin sheet of glass, and I'm on the wrong side. I went to work the day after the video, even though I didn't sleep. I thought maybe keeping busy would help. It didn't. I was quieter than usual. People asked if I was okay, and I said I had a cold. One guy joked that I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I laughed. At 3:15 p.m., I went out back to dump the bins and saw the silver Peugeot parked across the road again. Not on our street, not directly outside the cafe. just around the corner, facing away, but unmistakable. I looked at it too long, I know I did. The windows were darker this time, or maybe the light was just different. I couldn't see inside. I wanted to walk up to it, knock on the window, say something, anything. But my legs wouldn't move. Not toward it, not anymore. And then, right before I turned to go back inside, the brake lights flashed. Just once. That night I stayed with my friend Lottie. I didn't tell her everything, but I said enough to make her concerned. She let me crash on her sofa, made tea, didn't ask too many questions. I think she assumed I was dealing with some bad relationship drama, maybe an ex I hadn't told her about. I let her think that. It's easier than saying, there's a woman who looks exactly like me wearing my clothes and entering my flat at night while a car that shouldn't exist follows me everywhere I go. She offered to drive me to the police again, and I almost said yes. But then I remembered the officer's face, the blank way he looked at me when I mentioned the registration, like he'd heard it before, like he knew something, but wouldn't or couldn't say it. I slept for the first time in days at Lottie's. No dreams. No visits. No dress. I woke up feeling almost normal. Until I checked my phone. New message. You left the light on. I turned it off for you. No number. No reply option. Attached was a photo. Taken from inside my flat. Living room, couch, blanket crumpled in the corner, TV remote on the armrest, the lamp beside the bookshelf, glowing softly. It had been off when I left, and in the corner of the frame you could see just a sliver of someone's arm, wearing blue. I didn't tell Lottie. I thanked her, made an excuse about early shifts, and left. I went back to my flat around midday, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would split. Nothing was out of place. The door was locked, no signs of forced entry. The window was shut. The blanket was folded differently, but that could have been my memory playing tricks. Except it wasn't. Because on the kitchen counter was another note. Folded, no envelope, same handwriting as the first. Don't leave the light on again. It makes you look tired. That's when I broke. Not in the scream and cry kind of way, just a quiet, full-body shutdown. I sat on the floor, back against the fridge, knees pulled up, and just stopped. Stop trying to understand. Stop trying to rationalize. There's only so much your brain can do before it runs out of plausible explanations. I stayed there until it got dark. And when I finally moved, it was to unplug every lamp, every appliance, every source of light in the flat. I covered the windows with spare towels and garbage bags, taped them shut, turned off my phone. Turned off everything. I didn't want to be seen anymore. Not by her. Not by whoever's in that car. Not by anything. I laid down in the dark and told myself I wouldn't sleep. But I did. And I dreamed. She was standing over me, wearing the dress. Her face was inches from mine, and she wasn't smiling this time. She said in my own voice, "You can't keep hiding. You were never meant to stay separate." Then she reached down and touched my hand. And I woke up. In the dress. In the hallway. Front door wide open. I didn't move right away. I stood in the doorway, barefoot, half inside, half out, the cold air pulling at the hem of the blue dress. The same dress. I could feel it on my skin like it didn't belong there. Like it was wearing me instead of the other way around. I looked down and saw my keys in my hand, not held, clenched. My knuckles were white, my other hand was shaking. The hallway was empty, quiet, lights humming overhead. My upstairs neighbor's shoes were still tucked beside his door, and the carpet hadn't been disturbed. Nothing looked out of place, and that somehow made it worse. Everything around me was ordinary. It was me that wasn't. I stepped back inside, closed the door, locked it, twice. The flat was dark. I'd left it that way. No lamps, no light from the TV, nothing that could draw attention. But now it felt like something had been here while I was out of it. The air felt different, tighter, like walking into a room where someone had just had a quiet argument. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. It was me, I think. But my eyes looked too alert, too steady for someone who'd just woken up in a hallway wearing a dress she hadn't put on. I took it off, folded it, stuffed it into a tote bag, and shoved it into the cupboard under the sink. Then I took a hoodie from the back of the chair and pulled it on, sleeves too long, the familiar smell of detergent and fabric softener grounding me, barely. I sat on the couch and tried to piece together a timeline. I remembered unplugging the lamps. I remembered laying on the floor in the dark, and then nothing, no dream, no sound. Just waking up where I shouldn't have been, in clothes I didn't remember putting on. I checked the windows, still covered. I checked the door locked from the inside. So how had I ended up outside it? And why the dress? Why always the dress? I turned my phone back on. One new message. No number, no sender. We're almost aligned. That was all it said. I deleted it. Then I took the SIM card out and broke it in half. I spent the rest of that day cleaning. It wasn't rational, but I needed to move, needed to do something tactile. I scrubbed the bathroom even though it was clean. Took everything out of the kitchen drawers and reorganized them. Washed bedding that wasn't dirty. I was trying to push her out. Whatever version of me was bleeding into this one, the girl in the doorway, the girl in the mirror. I didn't want her here. I didn't want to be her. But you can only scrub a floor so many times before you start to see the shape of your own shadow stretched out across it. And then all you have left is the quiet and the waiting. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Just sat in the chair by the door, listening. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the hallway light outside my flat flickered. Just once. Then silence. The next morning I made a decision. I packed a bag. Basics only: toothbrush, chargers, leggings, jumper. Left the dress in the cupboard under the sink, still in the tote. Didn't touch it. I texted my mom, told her I needed a break. She didn't ask questions, just said of course I could stay with her. But I didn't go straight there. I went to the scrapyard. The one the police had said the Peugeot had been registered to. I'd remembered the name from the report's small place on the outskirts near Oldham, industrial estate with a row of mechanics and a fish and chip shop that always smells slightly burnt. I got there around 11. There was a man at the front in a high-vis vest, sipping from a thermos. He looked up as I approached. "Need something?" "I'm looking for a car," I said, trying to sound casual. "Silver Peugeot. Scrap claim was filed 6 months ago. Might have been a 307. He raised an eyebrow. "You a cop?" "No," I said quickly. "Personal reasons." He gave me a long look, then shrugged. "You'll need the reg number." I gave it to him. I'd memorized it. He walked off toward the office, and I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. He didn't come back. Finally, I walked over to the door and pushed it open. Empty. No one inside. No sign of him. Just a radio playing quietly in the background and a stack of folders on the desk. I scanned the top page. Nothing helpful. Names, dates, makes, models. Then I saw one labeled Incident, Staff Note. Curiosity overruled everything. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, just typed text. Vehicle scrap request processed manually. No visual confirmation of vehicle at time of disposal. Record generated via third-party intake. Then, handwritten beneath it. This one came from nowhere. No tow, no drop-off. Just a number. No sign it was ever on the lot. I put the file back exactly as I found it and left. I didn't stop moving until I got to my mum's. She was waiting with tea and biscuits like I'd just come back from holiday. I tried to act normal. We talked about her garden, about the neighbor's cat, about whether or not she should get a new kettle. I didn't tell her anything. Not about the messages. Not about the mirror. Not about the dress. Not about the car that was apparently never scrapped because it had never been there in the first place. I didn't sleep much that night either, but at least it felt safer. Until the morning, when I opened the curtains in the guest room and saw the silver Peugeot parked across the road. Same dent, same angle, facing directly at the house. And on the window, in the condensation, someone had written, "Soon." I stood there at the window for a long time. Longer than made sense, longer than was safe. The message on the window "soon" had already started to fade in the sunlight. A thin sheen of dew rolled down the glass, dragging the letters with it until they blurred into nothing. But I kept staring at that car. The silver Peugeot, same dull paint, same dent by the rear tire, like it had never moved, never aged, never changed. It was just there, as it always had been. I didn't tell Mum. She was downstairs making toast, humming like nothing was wrong. And honestly, I didn't want to drag her into this. Not when I didn't even know what this was. After a minute, I stepped back from the window, took a breath, and decided, no more running. No more hiding at friends' flats, no more staring at screens, waiting for the next message, or the next dream, or the next visit. I was going to end it. I put on my coat, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. The car didn't move. Didn't so much as twitch. I walked straight toward it, crossed the road, no hesitation this time. I reached the driver's side window and looked in. Empty. Again. But it wasn't just empty, it was wrong. There was no dust on the dashboard, no scratches on the wheel, no wear on the seat. It looked unused, like it had been set dressed to look lived in, a prop more than a machine. And in the cup holder, folded neatly, was another note. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. Thank you for staying the course. The mirror has been calibrated. That was all it said. I stood there holding it, stomach dropping, heart weirdly calm. The note didn't feel threatening. It felt final, like a signed invoice after a long project. I walked around to the front of the car and looked for a plate. There wasn't one. Not even a bracket. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually the passenger door unlocked by itself. A soft click, no sound from the locks, no movement from inside, just an invitation. And I took it. Because I had to. Because whatever this thing was, a person, a program, a version of me or something else, it had built itself around my life, my patterns, my choices, my face. And I needed to understand why. I got in. The interior was cold, not freezing, just sterile, like the air didn't come from outside. The radio was on, tuned to white noise, no station, no voice. I waited. Nothing happened. Then the rearview mirror flickered, not physically like a screen glitching, and suddenly it wasn't showing the street behind us. It was showing me, in my flat. Not me, now, me yesterday, lying on the floor, the blue dress folded next to me, eyes closed, completely still. Then the image shifted. The same flat, but someone else was standing over me. Same height, same hair, different face. Mine, but not. And I understood. She wasn't stalking me. She wasn't copying me. She was replacing me. And now that the mirror was calibrated, whatever that meant, the change was complete. I looked at my hands, turned them over. They looked the same, felt the same, but a sick feeling crept up from my stomach, like I was suddenly aware of being looked through instead of looking out. I got out of the car, closed the door, walked home. The car didn't follow. It didn't need to. I spent the rest of the day in silence. No music, no phone. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't check the curtains. Just sat on the floor and tried to remember things, specific things, memories from before this all started. I tried to recall the texture of my old school uniform, the smell of my mom's hair after she'd come home from her shift, the way it felt to hold hands with someone for the first time and not think about what your face was doing. And I could. They were there, which meant I was still me. Right? That night I slept. No dreams. Just a soft, cold feeling, like something had been taken from me gently, not ripped, just lifted, like a splinter removed from skin you didn't know had been pierced. I woke up feeling lighter. Not better, but lighter. And I knew somehow that it was over. Not because anyone told me. Not because the car vanished. Because I felt complete in a way that scared me more than anything else. I was no longer being watched. Because whatever had been watching me was now in me, or had become me, or maybe I'd become it. I don't know the language for this kind of thing. No one does. But I do know this. The silver Peugeot hasn't shown up since. The texts stopped. No more notes. No more sightings of someone in my dress. It's been 2 weeks. I go to work. I walk home. I sleep. It's all normal. Except for one thing. My reflection. Sometimes it doesn't feel delayed anymore. Sometimes it feels like I'm the one behind. Like the reflection is already moving before I do. Like it's checking to see if I'll catch up. And once, just once, I smiled at myself. And the mirror didn't smile back. I do not remember the first time I saw him in real life, because I am not sure I ever did. What I do remember is the night I sat in my dorm room, scrolling through photos from a college football game that a friend had posted online. I had been in a pretty good mood, tired but buzzing from the game, laughing at some of the blurry shots of us screaming in the stands. It was just normal college stuff, one of those nights that does not feel important until something shifts, and suddenly, you cannot look at it the same way again. In one of the pictures, I was in the middle of the frame, my face painted, holding up a hand in some half-finished cheer. And in the corner of the photo, blurred by distance but unmistakably there, was a man. He was tall, with a pale face that looked washed out even though the stadium lights were blasting down on the crowd. His expression was strange, not exactly angry, not happy either, more like nothing at all. Blank. And yet, somehow, he looked directly at me. At first I laughed. It was the kind of laugh you let out when something feels a little off but you do not want to admit it. I even pointed it out to my roommate, joking that I had a secret admirer in the bleachers. She squinted at the screen and shrugged. "Just some random guy," she said. "Creepy, sure, but you were surrounded by thousands of people. Someone was bound to look weird." I let it go, mostly. The human brain sees patterns everywhere, right? And stadiums are full of strangers. But then, a few nights later, I was scrolling through old photos for a completely unrelated reason. I was looking for a group shot from a concert I had gone to years earlier, when I was still in high school. And when I found it, my stomach dropped. There he was. The same man. Same pale face, same expression, same clothes even, standing at the edge of the crowd behind me, partially hidden but visible enough to make my skin crawl. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, that maybe my brain was playing tricks, seeing similarities that were not really there. People look alike all the time, right? But the longer I stared, the less convincing that excuse felt. The face was too exact. The height was the same. And the way he seemed to be looking only at me, even in a photo packed with hundreds of people, was impossible to ignore. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that expressionless face lingering just beyond the edge of the frame. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I pulled up old albums online, ones I had not looked at in years. High school prom, birthdays, family holidays. My friends laughing in photo booths, me blowing out candles, cousins and siblings crowded around tables. And in photo after photo, I found him, always in the background. Sometimes barely visible, his face poking through a gap between shoulders. Sometimes clearer, standing at a distance like he had been caught in the act of turning away. But he was always there. I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I was obsessing, imagining connections that were not real. But then I came across the Christmas photo from when I was 16. It was our whole family, lined up in front of the tree. My parents, my brother, my grandmother, all smiling stiffly like families do when a camera is pointed at them. And behind us, just off to the side, near the edge of the curtain, there he was again. Same face, same clothes, same blank stare. I felt sick. What made it worse was the realization that he never seemed to change. His face looked exactly the same across years. His clothes, though plain, were always identical. The jacket, the dark shirt, the way his hair was combed neatly but without style. I showed a couple of friends. Most of them squinted, then shrugged, said I was imagining things. One even laughed and told me it was probably a glitch from uploading or some kind of editing trick. But I could see it in their eyes that they were unsettled too, that the idea lingered even after they dismissed it. I stopped mentioning it after a while. The more people brushed it off, the crazier I felt. But inside, the fear only grew. Because here is the truth. I do not remember ever seeing him in person. Not once. I never turned around at a concert and noticed a tall, pale man staring at me. I never felt watched at family dinners or in classrooms. And yet, somehow, he was always there in the photos, always watching. The worst part was not even that he showed up in pictures. It was that I had no memory of anyone else noticing. None of my family members ever turned to point at him. None of my friends cracked a joke about the weird guy in the crowd. In all those moments, he seemed invisible until the photo revealed him later. By the time I closed my laptop that night, my hands were shaking. The silence of my room pressed down on me, too heavy, too sharp. I turned on the television just for background noise, anything to make me feel less alone. But even then, I could not shake the thought. If he had been there for years, watching from the edges, what did he want, and why me? I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of memory, just paranoia. But every creak of the building, every shadow shifting against the walls, made my heart pound faster. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of cameras flashing, of crowds screaming around me, and of one face standing still in the chaos. Blank, pale, unchanging. I woke with a start, gasping, the dream already slipping away, but the unease stayed, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I told myself I would stop looking, that if I just ignored it, the man would vanish back into whatever corner of my imagination I had dragged him from. But of course, I did not stop. Curiosity always wins, even when it feels like poison. The next day I dug out an old box from the back of my closet, the one full of loose photos and envelopes my mom had handed me when I left for college. Most of them were the kind of blurry childhood pictures you flip through once and never again. But I started spreading them out across the floor of my room, one by one, searching. It did not take long. In a picture of my 5th birthday, I am at the kitchen table, grinning with cake smeared across my cheeks. My cousins are crowded around, some smiling, some crying, the way kids do when sugar and attention are mixed together. And in the background, half cut off by the edge of the frame, is the man. He is not looking at the cake, not at the balloons. His head is tilted just slightly, his pale eyes angled straight toward me. I dropped the photo like it was burning hot. I tried another one. A kindergarten field trip to the zoo. There I am, holding hands with 2 other kids in front of the giraffe enclosure. And in the distance, by the fence, is a tall, thin shape. Same jacket, same face. My chest tightened. My whole childhood. Had he been there the whole time? I tried to remember that day. The sun beating down. The way the giraffes bent their necks low to chew from the feeders. But I could not recall any stranger lurking nearby. No teacher had mentioned it. No other parent had taken issue. Photo after photo. Elementary school class pictures. Little League baseball. The church Christmas play, where I was a shepherd with a crooked paper beard. In every one there he was, sometimes hidden, sometimes almost obvious, like he had stopped caring if anyone else noticed, and yet no one ever did. I pulled at my hair in frustration, pacing across the room. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly tore one of the photos in half by accident. I felt like I had discovered a stain that kept spreading no matter how hard I scrubbed. At some point, my roommate came back. She stopped in the doorway, looking at the photos scattered like fallen leaves. "What the hell are you doing?" she asked. I told her. I showed her. She crouched, picked up one of the pictures, squinted. "That guy?" she asked. "Yes. Do you see him? He is in every single picture." She stared longer than I expected. Finally, she frowned. "Okay, yeah, that is weird. But maybe it is some uncle or family friend? Someone who just happened to be around?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. "I would remember. My parents would have told me. And besides, look at him. He hasn't aged." She smirked like I was being dramatic. "Photos don't show age the same way. Maybe you're just obsessing." I wanted to scream. Instead, I gathered the photos back into their box, shoving them inside with enough force that the cardboard bent. That night, I called my mom. I tried to sound casual, asking if there had ever been a tall man who used to come around when I was a kid. Someone pale, maybe a family friend or neighbor. She laughed. Said she had no idea what I was talking about. "No mystery man followed you around," she said. "Trust me, I would have noticed. You were glued to my side most of the time anyway." I pressed her harder, but her voice only grew annoyed. "Honey, you're scaring yourself for no reason. Stop looking at old pictures if they creep you out so much." After I hung up, I sat in the dark with my phone in my hand, feeling hollow. She was right about one thing. The more I looked, the worse it got. But stopping felt impossible. It was like my brain needed proof, one way or the other, even if proof destroyed me. Later that night, I lay awake scrolling through social media, half numb. I tapped through tagged pictures, not even sure what I was looking for anymore. And there he was again. A photo someone else had taken, years ago, at a high school football game. I was not the focus. I was not even supposed to be in it, just blurred on the edge of the bleachers. But in the same frame, down at the fence, he stood tall and still, not moving, not cheering, just watching. I dropped my phone onto my chest and covered my face with both hands. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I thought about deleting everything, every album, every old picture, pretend none of it existed. But when I finally uncovered my face and glanced at the phone again, something shifted. The latest photo I had opened, the one from the high school game, had refreshed. The app glitched, I thought at first. But no, the background had changed. The man was closer. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. The figure was still in the frame, but this time he was not down at the fence. He was in the bleachers, 3 rows behind me, leaning forward with that same expressionless stare. My mouth went dry. I closed the app, reopened it. The original version reappeared. He was far away again, standing by the fence, but the image of him closer, leaning in, had seared into my brain. I could still see it when I shut my eyes. That was the moment I realized this was not just a strange detail hidden in old photos. Something was changing, or maybe something was letting me notice him more clearly now. I barely slept. Every time the pipes creaked or the walls groaned, I flinched, expecting to open my eyes and see him in the corner of the room. By morning, I decided I needed proof outside of photos. I needed someone else to notice him at the same time I did. Something in me felt certain that if I could just point fast enough, make someone look before he faded, I would know I was not insane. So I started carrying my phone everywhere. Not just to take pictures, but to test. Crowded coffee shops, the subway, even my own classes. Every time I glanced at a photo afterward, I searched for him. And I found him. Always in the background, still and silent. No one else ever noticed. I do not think I can explain how quickly paranoia eats at you. One week I was scrolling through old photos for fun. The next I was flinching at every sound, scanning every crowd, snapping pictures of strangers just to check later if one of them was him. It became a compulsion. I hated myself for it, but the more I fought it, the more I felt like he was winning. The first time I saw him outside of a photo was not the way I expected. It was not some dramatic sighting across the street or a figure lurking in the distance. It was quiet, almost forgettable, like he wanted me to doubt it. I could not sleep one night. My brain was buzzing, thoughts replaying over and over, looping through images of his pale face in the backgrounds of birthday parties and crowded stadiums. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up trying and went for a walk downtown. I told myself fresh air would help, that being around familiar streets would remind me the world was normal. The city was almost empty at that hour. Just the occasional car rolling through lights, the hum of neon from a diner, a couple of people smoking outside a bar. I walked slowly, hands stuffed into my jacket, trying to breathe in the calm. At one point, I stopped near a dark shop window to check my phone. Out of habit, I raised the camera and snapped a quick selfie. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know. When I looked at the photo, my blood ran cold. In the reflection of the glass behind me, he was there. He was not blurred this time, not far away in a crowd. He was standing a few feet behind me, tall and rigid, his head bent slightly like he was watching the top of my head. I spun around so fast I almost dropped the phone. The street behind me was empty. No footsteps, no figure, just an alley leading into shadow. I ran home without thinking. I sat awake the rest of the night, the phone heavy in my hand. I kept zooming in on the reflection, staring at the pale face, the hollow eyes. It was not a trick of light. It was not someone else walking by. It was him. The next morning I told myself I was done. No more photos. No more digging through albums or obsessing over faces. I even thought about deleting everything on my phone, just to stop myself from looking. But by the afternoon, my resolve cracked. I opened the gallery again, and there he was, in every new picture I had taken that week, at the coffee shop, standing by the counter, at the library, framed in the window, at the subway, a pale blur on the platform behind me. He was following me now, not just through memories. The hardest part was that no one else seemed to notice. I showed a picture to a coworker during lunch, desperate for validation. She studied it for a long time, then frowned. "Who's that guy? He's in every picture with you." For a split second, relief shot through me. Someone else saw him. It was real. But that night, I got an email. The sender was an address I did not recognize. No subject line, just a single attachment. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. It was a photo of me at my desk that day, taken from behind. I was sitting exactly where I had been when I showed my coworker. The lighting, the angle, everything matched. Only in this photo he was there too, standing right behind me, grinning. I could not breathe. My eyes blurred with tears. I searched the office later, checked corners, storage closets, even the stairwell. Nothing. I called my coworker, voice shaking, and asked if she had sent it. She swore she had no idea what I was talking about. That night, I locked every window and door in my apartment. I shoved a chair under the knob of my bedroom door, just in case. I lay in bed with the lights on, staring at the ceiling, my chest so tight I thought I might pass out. But exhaustion wins eventually. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding. My phone screen was glowing beside me. I had not touched it. Dozens of new photos filled the gallery. All of me, all taken from the same angle, my head pressed into the pillow, my chest rising and falling with sleep, each one closer than the last. My throat closed. I flipped through them with trembling fingers, my skin crawling. The final picture made me drop the phone onto the bed. It showed his face inches from mine. His eyes wide, empty. His mouth stretched in something between a grin and a grimace. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, listening to every sound in the apartment, the hum of the fridge, the pipes groaning in the walls, nothing else. Eventually, I forced myself to pick up the phone again. I deleted the pictures, but it felt pointless, like erasing footprints in sand while the tide comes in. The next day, I did not go to work. I could not face people, could not sit at that desk with the chance of him behind me. I sat in the apartment with the curtains drawn, jumping every time a car passed or someone walked down the hall. By evening, I realized I had not eaten. I stood in the kitchen, trying to convince myself to cook, when I noticed something taped to the outside of the fridge. It was a Polaroid. I knew instantly it was not mine. I do not own a Polaroid camera. The photo showed me standing exactly where I was now, in the kitchen, one hand on the counter. My face was turned slightly, like I had been caught off guard. And next to me, his hand was reaching for my shoulder. I staggered back so fast I hit the wall. The kitchen spun. I tore the Polaroid down and dropped it, my hands shaking. It was not a photo from the past. It was now. It was the present. And he was closer than ever. I stopped looking at photos for a while after the Polaroid, or at least I tried to. But the problem with something like this is that even when you swear off searching, the world is full of cameras. Other people take pictures. Other people tag you. And the harder you try to avoid it, the more paranoid you get about what you are not seeing. For a few days, I tried to live normally. I went to work, kept my head down, told myself not to obsess. But every time someone lifted a phone in my direction, even casually, I felt a wave of panic. My chest would tighten, and I would imagine him there again, just out of sight, waiting to be captured in the background. I started noticing other things too. My dog barked at the corners of rooms where nothing stood. I caught my reflection in windows and thought I saw movement just behind me, only for it to vanish when I spun around. And then there were the nights. The nights became unbearable. I would lock every door, wedge chairs beneath the knobs, double-check the windows, and still I woke up to find small changes. A cabinet left open that I knew I had closed. A cup sitting on the counter when it had been in the sink. Once, my phone was resting on the floor beside the bed, the screen facing upward, camera app open, as if someone had been using it while I slept. I told myself, maybe I was sleepwalking, maybe I was doing these things and forgetting, but the truth felt heavier than that, pressing down on me. I remembered the last photo, his face inches from mine. How could I forget? I tried to tell a coworker again, more desperately this time. I pulled her aside, my voice shaking, and begged her to listen. She humored me, asking questions, nodding, but the more I explained, the more ridiculous it sounded. A man who appears in every photo of my life, never aging, sometimes moving closer. A faceless email, a Polaroid I never took. It sounded like paranoia, delusion, or worse. She finally sighed and said gently, I think you should talk to someone, like a professional. Maybe this is stress. Maybe you're seeing patterns that aren't there. I wanted to scream in her face, but I swallowed it down, nodded, and said I would think about it. That night I sat alone in my apartment with the curtains drawn, the television playing static because I was too afraid to change the channel. I thought about her words, a professional. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was unraveling. But then my phone buzzed. It was another email, same unknown address, no subject. This time it was not a photo. It was a short video. My stomach lurched as I pressed play. The video showed my living room, recorded from an angle near the ceiling. The quality was grainy, but the furniture was unmistakable. In the frame, I could see myself sitting on the couch, head bowed, scrolling through my phone. The video lasted maybe 30 seconds, just me shifting, adjusting, picking up a glass of water. And then, near the end, he appeared. The man stepped into the frame from the left, slow and deliberate. He stood directly behind me, his pale face bent down, close enough that if the me in the video had turned, our eyes would have met. But I never turned. I just sat there, scrolling, oblivious. The video cut to black. I dropped the phone like it was poison. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the corners of the living room, scanning for cameras, tearing apart shelves and vents. I found nothing. But the video had to come from somewhere. Someone was watching me, recording me, sending proof that he was closer than I ever realized. I did not sleep that night. I sat with my back to the wall, every light on, the baseball bat from the closet across my lap. The next morning, bleary-eyed and shaking, I tried to convince myself it was some elaborate prank. Maybe someone had access to my photos. Maybe they were editing things, staging them. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a lie. No one else could make him appear in pictures from decades ago. No one else could explain why he never changed. Later that week, I caught my reflection in a shop window while walking home. For just a second, I thought I saw him standing directly beside me in the glass. I turned so fast my neck popped, but the sidewalk was empty. I laughed out loud, a sharp, broken sound, just to convince myself I was still tethered to reality. But the worst was still coming. One night, I finally worked up the courage to go through my photos again, determined to find answers. I sat with the box of old prints spread across the floor, my phone beside me. I told myself I would catalog every instance, make a timeline, maybe show it to someone who could help. But when I reached for the oldest picture I had, a baby photo my mom had taken when I was only a few months old, I froze. It was him. He was standing in the background of that picture too. I could not breathe. I dropped the photo, hands trembling, bile rising in my throat. He had been there from the very beginning. Before I could walk, before I could talk, before I even knew how to notice. This was not a stalker, not a prank, not a coincidence. This was something else. I shoved the photos back into the box, slammed the lid, and shoved it into the back of my closet. But that did nothing. I could still see his pale face burned into my mind, unchanged across decades, unblinking, patient. That night as I lay in bed I heard something. 3 faint clicks, almost like the shutter of a camera, coming from the dark corner of the room. I did not look. I buried my head under the pillow, shaking, whispering to myself that it was nothing. But deep down, I knew. He was no longer just in the photos. He was here. I thought the worst part was seeing him in old photos, but that was nothing compared to feeling him in the room. Once that line was crossed, nothing felt safe anymore. The box of pictures stayed buried in the closet, but it did not matter. I no longer needed to search for him. He was everywhere, whether I looked or not. The first morning after those faint shutter sounds, I walked into the kitchen to find my phone propped against a mug, camera facing the hallway. The screen showed that the recording app had been running all night. I never set it up. My stomach turned to stone. I deleted the file without watching it, because some part of me knew what I would see, and I could not handle more proof. At work, people started commenting that I looked sick. I did not bother with excuses. How could I explain the circles under my eyes came from listening to a presence move through my apartment every night? Or that the reason my hands shook was not caffeine, but the memory of seeing my own baby photos with him already in the frame. I told myself I needed evidence, real, solid evidence I could show someone else. Maybe then I would not sound insane. So I bought a cheap second-hand camera from a pawn shop, thinking that if I left it running on a tripod, maybe I could catch him. That night, I set it up in the living room. The little red light blinked steadily. I sat in the chair across from it, bat on my lap again, forcing myself to stay awake. Hours passed. My eyelids grew heavy. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is jerking awake to the sound of the camera shutting off. When I checked the recording, my blood iced over. The footage showed me sitting exactly as I remembered, bat across my knees, eyes drooping, and then, at some point, he entered the frame. He stepped into the room from the left, exactly the way he had in the emailed video, only this time it was clearer, sharper. His face was pale but not blurred. His mouth was twisted into something that was not quite a smile. He walked to where I sat and leaned down, his face level with mine. For nearly a minute, the two of us stayed like that, me asleep, him bent over, studying me. Then he reached out one long hand and pressed a finger to the bat. The wood shifted slightly in my lap. I felt sick. I rewound the video again and again, watching his finger nudge the bat, confirming it was real. He could touch things. He could move things. I deleted the footage, not because I wanted to forget it, but because I could not stand having it exist. sitting there like bait on my hard drive. The next day I skipped work again. My boss called twice before giving up. I sat in my apartment with the blinds shut tight, lights off, silence pressing down like a weight. At one point, I thought I heard someone walking in the hallway outside. Slow, steady steps that paused right outside my door. I held my breath until they faded. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek into the hallway, it was empty. But on the floor, just beneath the crack of my door, someone had slid another Polaroid. This one showed me sleeping in my bed. Same angle as before, same pale face, inches from mine. Only this time, his hand was on my shoulder. I dropped the photo like it burned and kicked it across the room. I realized then that it was not just about photos anymore. He wanted me to know he was close. He wanted me to see what he could do. That night I did not even bother pretending to sleep. I sat upright in bed, lights blazing, bat beside me. I stared at the door, daring it to open. Hours ticked by, my vision blurred with exhaustion. At some point I must have drifted again, because when I blinked awake, the lights were out, all of them. The switch by the bed had been flipped. My throat closed. I groped blindly for the bat, but my hand met empty sheets. Something moved in the corner of the room, a faint sound, like fabric shifting. I tried to force my eyes to adjust, but the dark felt thicker than usual, almost alive. Then, from somewhere in that blackness, came the faintest click, like a shudder. I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, to run, but I lay perfectly still. If he was going to take a picture, let him. Maybe that was all he wanted. When the lights flicked back on, by themselves, the bat was leaning against the wall, and a fresh Polaroid lay on my chest. It showed me in bed exactly as I was, wide-eyed and terrified. He was not in the photo this time, just me, staring into the lens like a trapped animal. The message was clear. He did not need to be in the picture anymore. He was the one taking them. The next morning, I smashed the pawn shop camera and threw my phone in the trash. I unplugged my laptop, pulled the battery out, hid it in a drawer. I thought maybe if I stopped giving him ways to appear, he would fade. But that night, I heard scratching on the walls. Not rats, not pipes, long deliberate strokes, like someone dragging a nail across the plaster. I pressed my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth, whispering nonsense just to drown it out. The scratching moved from wall to wall, circling me, patient. When silence finally came, I thought maybe he had given up. But in the morning, the walls were covered with faint marks, not random scratches, lines. Dozens of rectangles, like frames, like photographs. I stopped going to work altogether. I stopped answering texts. I pulled the curtains closed and kept every light in the apartment on. It did not matter. The walls were still covered in those faint frames, scratched over and over, until every surface felt like a gallery waiting to be filled. At first I tried to paint over them, but by the next morning, they reappeared, neat and deliberate. I started sleeping in the living room, then on the floor, then not at all. It felt pointless to fight anymore. One evening, maybe a week into this, I heard a knock on the door, just 3 soft taps. My whole body froze. I had stopped opening the door for anyone, but this was different. It was patient, rhythmic, like a metronome ticking out my pulse. I waited, barely breathing, until the knocking stopped. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but when I checked the peephole, no one was there. Just the empty hallway stretching on forever. When I turned back into the apartment, I saw a new Polaroid sitting on the coffee table. I had not heard anyone enter. I had not heard the door move, but it was there all the same. The photo was of me, at that exact moment, standing in front of the peephole, my eye pressed against it. That was when I broke. I called my mom. I told her everything, every detail, my voice cracking and frantic. I expected her to hang up, or worse, to laugh, but she went very quiet. Then she said, in a voice I barely recognized, "I wondered when you would notice him." Her words knocked the breath out of me. "What do you mean?" I demanded. "You told me I was imagining things." "I had to," she said. "It starts earlier if you acknowledge him. The longer you ignore him, the longer he stays in the background. But he always comes closer eventually." My knees went weak. I sat down hard on the couch. "You knew? You've seen him too?" "Not me," she whispered. "Your grandfather. He used to talk about it, the man who showed up in photographs. My father never believed him, said it was just paranoia. But when I was cleaning out the attic years ago, I found boxes of pictures. Every single one had that man in it, always watching, always waiting." I could barely process what she was saying. My skin prickled cold. "What does he want?" I asked. Silence stretched on the other end. Finally, she said, "I think he wants to be remembered, to exist in more than just pictures. But the closer he gets, the more he takes. That is why your grandfather, well, he did not die the way the papers said." Her voice cracked then, and I knew she would not say more. After that, I could not sit still. I tore through the apartment, digging up every Polaroid, every printed photo, every scrap of evidence I had. I stuffed them into a bag, hauled them down to the dumpster, and set them on fire. I watched until the flames reduced everything to ash. For a moment, I felt lighter. Maybe this was how I ended it. But when I came back upstairs, the apartment walls were covered with new Polaroids, taped neatly inside each scratched rectangle. Dozens of them, hundreds. Every one was of me. Me brushing my teeth, me sleeping, me cooking, me curled on the floor crying. Each one taken from a different angle, as if I lived inside a house made of cameras. And in some of them, he was there too, closer than ever, his pale face leaning into the frame, his hand reaching, his expression as blank as always. I ripped them down in a frenzy, screaming, tearing the walls bare, but more appeared as fast as I could destroy them. I gave up, collapsed on the floor, sobbing into my hands. That was when the thought came, the thing that had been pressing on me ever since my mom's call. Maybe this was never about the photos themselves. Maybe it was about me. He had been following me since childhood, since birth, maybe even before. The photos were just proof, a way for him to mark his presence. If he wanted to step out fully, to stop lurking in frames, there was nothing I could do. But if he wanted to be remembered, maybe I could take that power back. I did something reckless then. I set up a chair in the center of the room, placed my phone on a tripod, and sat down facing the camera. I hit record, and then I spoke. I told the whole story, from the first time I noticed him in a crowd photo to the Polaroids taped across my walls. I held up the pictures, one after another, showing them to the lens. I described the sound of the shutters at night, the scratching frames, the way my mom's voice had broken when she admitted she knew, and then I said his name. Not because I knew it, but because I gave him one. I called him the Watcher. I said it out loud, over and over, daring him to step out, daring him to take me if that was what he wanted. The air grew heavy. The lights flickered. For a second I thought I saw movement just behind me, tall and pale and waiting. My whole body went cold. But I kept speaking, louder and louder, forcing my voice to fill the room. And then, suddenly, it was quiet. The light steadied. The walls were bare again. Every Polaroid, every frame, gone. I sat there shaking, unable to move. When I checked the recording later, the footage showed only me, sitting in the chair, talking to an empty room. No flickering lights, no pale figure, no proof. But since that night, the photos have stopped. No Polaroids under the door. No frames scratched into the walls. No pale face in old albums. Sometimes I think I ended it by naming him. Sometimes I think I just gave him exactly what he wanted. I do not take pictures anymore. I do not let people photograph me. My social media is gone. My phone stripped of every camera. But every so often, when I pass a mirror, I get the feeling I am not alone in the reflection, and I wonder if one day someone else will find me in the background of their photos, staring blankly, unchanged, waiting to be remembered. I never imagined my first real job as a nurse would be like this. I had always pictured myself in a busy hospital in the middle of the city, surrounded by beeping machines, bustling doctors, and the reassuring chaos of modern medicine. Fresh out of nursing school, I thought starting on night shifts would give me a quiet way to get my bearings, learn the ropes without getting swallowed up by daytime madness, something to build experience. Prove myself. What I got was something else entirely. The job was in a hospital located just outside the city limits. Not exactly the countryside, but far enough from the center that the world felt quieter, thinner even. The building stood alone at the end of a winding road, backed by dense pine forest that seemed to stretch forever. On my first drive up, I noticed the lights from the city fading behind me faster than they should have. My GPS cut out completely about halfway there. That should have been a red flag, but I chalked it up to bad reception. The hospital itself looked like something out of an older time. It was tall and narrow with a steep slate roof and wide stone steps leading to an entrance that groaned when opened. Its outer walls were streaked from years of rain and wear. Ivy clung to the cracks, and the windows were old and framed in peeling paint. There was something off about it, something tired. Still, I pushed forward with my bag slung over one shoulder and my badge pinned neatly on my shirt. The inside was surprisingly well kept. Old, yes, but clean. The kind of clean that feels heavy, like it has been done by hand over and over for decades. The white walls had a faint yellow tinge, the result of time and fluorescent lighting, and the hallways had a soft antiseptic smell that could not quite mask the scent of moisture soaked into the concrete. It was quiet, too quiet actually, like the whole place was holding its breath. I arrived at the nurse station at exactly 10 o'clock in the evening. A few of the day staff were packing up, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and practiced indifference. A woman with dark eyes and hair pulled back in a bun approached me. She looked only slightly older than me, but walked like someone who had seen more than her fair share of long nights. "You're the new night nurse?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "first shift." She gave me a quick once-over, then offered a half-smile that did not reach her eyes. "I'm Yuki," she said, 2 weeks in myself. They're desperate for staff, so they'll hire anyone with a pulse and a license. I laughed awkwardly. She did not. "Did they give you the rules yet?" she asked. I blinked. "Rules?" "Yeah," she said, frowning. "They didn't give you a set of rules for the night shift?" "No, just my schedule and the floor plan." She looked disturbed by that, genuinely disturbed. "That's not good," she said under her breath. "What do you mean?" Yuki glanced around the empty nurse station, then grabbed a piece of scrap paper from a drawer and a pen. She started writing quickly, her eyes flicking toward the hallway. "Just in case they forgot," she muttered. "These were given to me on my first night. Follow them, seriously." She handed me the paper, now filled with neat, slanted handwriting. There were 6 short lines written on it. 1. At 12:45 in the morning, make sure the windows in the west wing are closed. If any of them are open, close them and leave immediately. 2. If you see a patient walking in the hallway after midnight, do not speak to them. They are not patients anymore. 3. If the lights in the east wing go out, leave that wing and do not return until sunrise. 4. If the elevator doors open by themselves, do not get inside. Wait until they close. 5. If you see a shadow that does not belong to you, leave the room immediately. 6. If escape is your only option, be prepared to sacrifice a part of yourself. I stared at the paper. It read like something out of a campfire story. I looked up at Yuki, expecting her to smirk or laugh, or tell me it was some weird hazing tradition for rookies. She just looked back at me with a tired seriousness that made my stomach knot. "You think this is a joke?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wish it was." "Are you saying this is real?" She nodded once. "I have seen things. I followed the rules, and I am still here. That is all I can say." Before I could ask her anything else, she picked up her bag and walked off toward the exit. I was left alone in the nurse station with my heart beating too fast and the list of rules clutched in my hand. I folded it and slid it into my pocket, telling myself it was nonsense. It had to be. The hours passed slowly. Most of the patients were asleep. The monitors beeped softly. I did rounds, checked vitals, kept my notes. Everything seemed fine on the surface. But there was something off about the way the building sounded, or maybe it was how it did not sound. The silence felt artificial, like the air was too heavy with secrets. I tried to stay busy, but I found myself glancing at the hallway more than once. Something in the shadows moved the wrong way, or maybe I just imagined it. At 12:30, I found myself walking toward the west wing. I didn't plan to, not really. My feet just sort of carried me there. I passed the patient rooms, all of them quiet, most of them empty. The windows were large and old, glass thick with age. I checked the first one, closed. The second, closed. The third, same. The last one was cracked open, just a sliver, but enough for cold air to seep through. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, the words from the rule sheet repeating in my head. If a window in the west wing is open, close it and leave immediately. I reached out and pressed it shut. The latch clicked. Something about the sound felt final. I turned and left the wing without looking back. I didn't know why, but it felt like something had watched me the entire time. I walked back toward the nurse station with a feeling I could not explain. The night was far from over, but the rules now felt heavier in my pocket. And I had a feeling they would not be the last thing I would have to follow. I returned to the nurse's station trying to calm the strange heaviness in my chest. I told myself it was just nerves, first night jitters, but the more I told myself that, the more it felt like a lie. The air was still thick, my skin prickled, like something unseen had brushed against me. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the pot someone had left behind. It tasted bitter and old, but it gave me something to do, anything to keep my hands from shaking. I checked the clock, 1:15. The hallways were quiet, lights humming overhead like tired insects. I did another round, mostly out of routine, trying to shake the tension that had been building since the window. As I walked past the patient rooms, most of them were quiet, just the soft beeping of machines and the slow, rhythmic breathing of those inside. It gave me a strange comfort, like little islands of life floating in a sea of silence. When I passed room 5, I noticed something odd. The patient was awake, pacing. That in itself wasn't strange. Some patients struggle to sleep, but something about the way he moved made me pause. His steps were too even, too mechanical. Like he was walking to the beat of something I couldn't hear. I watched for a few seconds through the glass, and his head snapped to the side. Not toward me, not exactly, just slightly to the left. Like he heard something that I couldn't. Then he started walking again, back and forth, back and forth. I moved on, trying not to linger. When I turned the corner into the hallway that led to the second-floor corridor, my stomach dropped. A man in a hospital gown was standing halfway down the hall. He wasn't moving. He was facing the wall, his head tilted unnaturally to one side. I stopped in my tracks, flashlight in hand, the list of rules already echoing through my mind. If you see a patient walking in the hallway after midnight, do not speak to them. They are not patients anymore. I did not call out. I did not ask if he needed help. I just watched him. His arms hung limply at his sides. His feet were bare. There were faint, wet footprints trailing behind him. His breathing was all wrong. It was loud, shallow, gurgling, like something inside his lungs was broken. Each inhale was a struggle, each exhale a whisper of pain. He took one step backward, just one, not toward me exactly, but away from the wall. I took that as my cue to leave. I turned back the way I came, forcing myself to walk slowly, pretending I wasn't panicking, pretending that if I just followed the rules, I would be okay. I made it back to the station and shut the door, hands gripping the edge of the counter until the whiteness in my knuckles faded. I tried to calm down. I told myself I hadn't spoken to him. I had followed the rule. At 1:45, I sat down and checked the security monitors again. My eyes scanned each screen. The East Wing was still quiet. I took a deep breath and leaned back in the chair. That was when I heard it, a soft tapping, faint, too faint to place at first. I leaned forward. It was coming from one of the side halls. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. I stood up slowly. The rules ran through my head again like a mantra. No mention of tapping, no mention of noise like this. But curiosity is a strange thing, especially in the quiet. I walked down the hall, listening. The sound grew louder, closer. It was coming from room 7. The door was cracked slightly open. The tapping was inside. Then it stopped. I felt cold air rush from the room like a breath exhaled from a mouth that had been holding it in too long. I pushed the door open wider, just enough to look inside. That was when I saw her. She was standing in the far corner of the room, a woman, thin, frail. Her hair hung long over her face like strands of seaweed. Her mouth stretched wide into an unnatural smile, too wide. Her teeth were small, sharp, and perfect. She didn't blink. Her arms hung at her sides like they didn't belong to her. She did not move, not at first. I took one step back, ready to close the door, when she turned her head. Just her head. The rest of her body stayed still, her eyes locked on mine. Black, endless, like holes torn in the world. She grinned wider. I slammed the door shut. I backed away from the room, heart pounding so hard I thought it might stop from the effort. I ran back to the station, trying not to scream. This was not normal. This was not what I signed up for. I tried to gather my thoughts. Then I remembered the elevator. The ding rang out behind me. I turned. The elevator doors had opened. Empty. Rule 4. If the elevator doors open by themselves, do not get inside. Wait for them to close. I stood still. I did not move. The elevator waited, silent, open. Then, slowly, it closed again. No sound, just a smooth motion like a mouth shutting after a long breath. I turned back to the desk. My hands were shaking. I needed something familiar, something real. I opened a drawer and found more papers, patient forms, records, schedules. Then something else. A crumpled paper, buried underneath a chart. I opened it. My stomach dropped. It was the same list of rules Yuki had given me, except it had 7. Rule 3 had changed. Rule 3. Do not enter room 7 after 2 in the morning. I glanced at the clock. 2:05. I had been in there. I had broken the rule. My hands went cold. A shadow stretched across the floor in front of me. I froze. It did not belong to me. It was not mine. It moved on its own. The room grew colder. Rule 5. If you see a shadow that does not belong to you, leave the room immediately. I could not breathe. She was coming again. But now, the shadow had found me. And I had broken the rules. I stumbled backward from the shadow, breath caught in my throat, heart pounding like a drum. My legs felt like wet cement as I forced them to move. I did not run. I could not. Running felt like it would draw attention. Whatever this was, whatever was now stalking me through that creeping stretch of blackness, it wanted me to panic. I would not give it the satisfaction. I turned slowly, moving past the nurse station with shaky steps and forcing myself not to look back. The corridor behind me groaned softly, the sound of the building stretching or settling, or maybe just warning me. Every light seemed dimmer now, every corner darker than it had been only minutes before. I walked until I reached the hallway that led to the patient restrooms. I ducked inside one of the staff lounges and shut the door quietly behind me, pressing my back against the cold wood as I slid down to the floor. I sat in silence for a while, trying to slow my breathing. My hand instinctively reached into my scrub pocket, fingers trembling as I pulled out the folded sheet Yuki had given me. I stared at the rules. I had broken one. Rule 3, about room 7. I had gone in after 2 in the morning. I had seen her, and now something was following me. I remembered the way her head had turned without her body moving, that grin like it had been carved into her face. The image was burned into my mind. No matter how hard I tried, I could not blink it away. I closed my eyes for a moment. Big mistake. I saw her there too. In the dark behind my eyelids, she was waiting. I opened them quickly, breath catching again. I looked at the wall clock. It was nearly 3. I had been hiding here for almost 40 minutes, and I had no idea what might be waiting for me on the other side of that door. Still, I could not stay here forever. I needed to move, and I needed to survive the rest of the night. I stood slowly, knees aching from sitting on the hard floor for too long. I opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. The hospital was dead silent, not just quiet, not just still. It was a dead kind of silence, the kind you feel in your bones, a wrong kind. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, but that was all. The monitors were still working, but their rhythm felt slower now, like everything was winding down without telling me why. I made my way back to the nurse station, and that was when I noticed something odd on the monitors. One of the feeds from the West Wing hallway was flickering. Static broke across the screen in quick flashes, but between the flickers, I saw something strange, a figure, standing completely still in the center of the hallway. I could not make out any details, just the shape, slender, upright, not moving, not blinking, just there. Every time the screen blinked back to life, the figure had shifted just slightly. Closer, then gone, then closer again. I switched off the monitor. That was enough of that. I needed to find somewhere with light, somewhere where I could keep my back to the wall. I walked down the central corridor toward the east stairwell, away from the patient rooms. As I walked, I kept looking for shadows that did not belong to me, for footprints that were not mine, for reflections that moved out of sync. I thought about the final rule, the one about escape, the one that said if I had no other option, I would have to give something up. Sacrifice a part of yourself. I didn't know what that meant yet, but the way the hospital was closing in on me made it feel less like a warning and more like a promise. I turned the corner and reached the stairwell. I placed one hand on the railing and froze. There was something on the steps, a trail of wet footprints, bare feet, too small for a man, too large for a child. I counted them, one set going up. None coming down. I backed away and turned around. I would take the long way. I ended up back at the staff lounge, the one where I had taken cover earlier. I hesitated at the door before opening it again. The lights were still on. It looked the same. But I did not trust anything in this place now. Still, I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. It clicked quietly. I leaned against it, pressing my ear against the wood. I heard breathing. Not mine. It was shallow, hunched, wet. It was coming from the corner behind the coffee machine. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I stayed absolutely still. I could see my reflection in the metal side of the coffee machine. My face was pale, eyes wide, hair stuck to my forehead with sweat. Then my reflection moved. But I hadn't. It smiled at me, not a soft smile, a cruel one. It tilted its head the same way she had. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair as I scrambled for the door. The lights flickered and buzzed. The reflection in the metal stepped forward, closer, out of sync with me. I threw the door open and ran. Back into the hallway, breath ragged, eyes darting. I kept moving, not stopping for anything. The rules were clear now. I was in danger. I turned a corner and stopped cold. The elevator doors were open. Again. No sound. No one inside. Just open, waiting. This time, I saw something else. A trail of blood leading up to the threshold. Small drops, one by one. Like someone had been dragged away, or worse, walked in willingly. I backed away slowly. The doors closed with a soft ding. The sound echoed like a scream. I made it back to the nurse station, heart slamming, throat dry. I locked the door, sat behind the desk, Checked the monitors again. They were all black now. Every single one. Static. Except for one. Room 7. She was standing in the corner, looking at the camera, and smiling. I turned it off, and waited, because I still had hours to go, and I was already starting to wonder how much more I could take. The hours felt longer than they should have. It was like time had slowed just to mock me. Every second ticked by with the weight of a full minute. I stayed at the nurse station, watching nothing, doing nothing, just breathing and waiting and trying not to fall apart. I had turned off all the monitors. I could not watch them anymore. Seeing her face again would be enough to send me over the edge. So I sat there in silence, staring at the whiteboard on the wall, pretending it was normal. The hum of the lights overhead was starting to sound more like whispering than electricity. I told myself it was my imagination, that my ears were tired, that the stress was making me hear things. Still, the sound felt too deliberate, like words just out of reach. I focused on my breathing, counting every inhale and exhale, trying to remind myself I was still here, I was still real. I must have drifted off for a few minutes. My head jerked up suddenly, and I looked around in a panic. Everything looked the same, but I could feel that it wasn't. Something was different. Something had changed while I was unconscious. The air was colder. The room was too still. I stood up slowly and walked to the door of the station. I opened it just a crack and peeked out. There was someone at the far end of the hallway. Not walking. Not moving. Just standing. It was a silhouette, completely still, facing the wall. It didn't react to the door opening. I closed it quietly and locked it again. Rule 2 came back to me like a scream in my mind. If you see a patient walking in the hallway after midnight, do not speak to them. They are not patients anymore. But this one was not walking. He was waiting. I moved away from the door and sat again, back against the wall this time. I did not want to face the monitors. I just stared at the tiles on the floor and tried to keep calm. I whispered the rules to myself like a prayer. There were 6 rules on the list Yuki had given me, but I had already seen a different copy with 7. What if there were more? What if I didn't know them all? That idea terrified me more than anything else. I decided I needed to check. I went back to the drawers and started rummaging through the mess of papers again. My fingers trembled as I flipped through old records and staff reports, hoping for another copy. Something, anything. After a minute or two, I found it. Another list. Different handwriting. Older. Faded. It had 8 rules. I read them one by one. Most were the same. Some worded differently, but the last one chilled me. Rule 8. If you hear your name whispered from a dark room, do not answer. No one should know your name. I read it again and again. Then I heard it. From down the hallway, through the open air vents that led into one of the side rooms. A whisper. James. It was soft, almost playful. James. I froze. My blood turned to ice. James. It came again. Same voice, same softness. I stood up and backed away from the vent. My name echoed once more, fading into silence, like it had never been there at all. I slammed the vent shut and moved away. My mind was racing now. That rule had not been in the original list. How many were missing? How many had I already broken? I didn't want to think about it. By now it was close to 4 in the morning. The world outside was still dark. The kind of dark that makes you forget what daylight looks like. I hadn't heard anything else for a while, so I gathered the courage to walk the halls again. Just for a bit. Just to feel like I had control over something. I kept my flashlight low and my steps light. I did not want to disturb anything. The hallway was quiet, the lights humming again with that almost whisper sound. I passed the break room. I passed the patient restrooms. I passed room 7 without looking at the door. Then I reached the stairwell again, and the elevator across from it opened. No ding, no sound. It just opened. I stopped where I was and didn't move. The inside was pitch black, darker than it should have been with the hallway lights on. Then something stepped out. Not a full figure, not a body. Just a leg, long, pale, bending in the wrong direction. It stepped forward. Then another leg followed. Still no sound, no breath, just movement. I turned and walked away as fast as I could without running. I did not look back. I did not check if it followed. I returned to the nurse station and shut the door. This time I jammed a chair under the handle. It would not stop anything, I knew that, but it made me feel like I was doing something. That had to count for something. Then, just as I sat down, the power went out. All of it. Every light. Every monitor. Every sound. Gone. Only darkness. Thick, swallowing, perfect darkness. I reached for my flashlight, but it would not turn on. The battery had been fine, but now it was dead. I sat in that darkness for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something to move, something to speak, something to breathe. Nothing came. Eventually, the lights flickered back to life. Only half of them. Some buzzed back on, some stayed dark. The hallway outside looked dim, flickering in places. I checked the clock. 4:22. Almost there. Almost. But the rules weren't finished with me yet. Because the last thing I saw before the lights came on fully was my reflection in the glass of the medicine cabinet. And it blinked. But I hadn't. I did not move for a long time. I just stared at the reflection, unblinking, breath held tight in my lungs. I blinked once. The reflection didn't. It only moved after I did. I stepped back, eyes locked on the glass, every nerve in my body screaming. The reflection tilted its head the wrong way, like it was studying me through a layer of glass. Then it smiled. I stumbled away from the cabinet and nearly tripped over the corner of the nurse's desk. My legs felt weak, barely able to hold me up. My reflection, it was not mine, not anymore. I grabbed my phone and tried to open the flashlight app. Dead. My battery had been at 70% not long ago. Now it would not even turn on. Nothing was working. No monitors, no phones, not even the emergency call button. I was cut off, completely. Whatever was in this building had severed me from the rest of the world. I was alone now. I remembered the scalpel. I had left it back by the supply cart. I needed something to defend myself, even if it was useless. My hand still throbbed from the wound, but the blood had stopped. I wrapped the torn sleeve of my uniform tighter around it and took a deep breath. The hallway was dim when I opened the door again. Lights flickered above me, and the silence had returned. No whispers, no voices. Just the low mechanical buzz of lights on the verge of dying. I walked slowly, carefully, trying not to draw attention. I passed room 7 again. Its door was wide open. That was not right. It had been closed before, tightly shut. No one should have been able to open it. I kept walking. The elevator was still open too, the dark void inside unchanged. I could feel something watching me from it, not directly, not like eyes I could see, just the unmistakable weight of attention, heavy and ancient. I reached the supply cart and found the scalpel. It was still there. I held it tight in my good hand and backed away. Then I heard the voice. Not a whisper, not like before. It was my voice, calling my name from the other side of the hall. James. It said, James, help me. I froze. James, please. It was my voice, my exact voice, my tone, my rhythm, but it was not coming from my mouth. James, come here. It came from the dark room next to room 11, the one that had always been empty. I took a step back. James. The voice grew more desperate, more real. Then it screamed. James. It was the loudest sound I had heard all night. It echoed down the halls like thunder. The lights above me exploded one by one. Glass rained down. I dropped to the floor, covering my head. The hallway plunged into darkness again. I stayed there, on the floor, breathing hard, surrounded by broken glass. I waited. No footsteps. No breathing. Only silence. I stood slowly, keeping the scalpel close, and made my way back to the nurse station, but the door was gone. Gone. The entire hallway had changed. The signs were different. The wallpaper was peeling. The floor was carpeted now, thick and red. I was not in the same part of the hospital anymore. I had been shifted. Somehow. The hospital had moved me. The silence was thick, heavy, like walking through fog. The carpet muffled my footsteps. Every door I passed was closed, but something told me not to open them. I could hear faint murmurs behind them. Singing, scratching, crying, I kept walking. At the end of the hallway was a door with a brass handle. It looked older than the others. The number above it was scratched out, completely, just gouges in the wood where numbers used to be. The air around it felt colder. I reached for the handle. My hand shook. The door opened before I touched it. I stepped back. A child stood in the doorway, pale, barefoot, wearing a hospital gown that hung off her like wet cloth. Her eyes were black. Not dark. Black. Empty. She opened her mouth and spoke in my voice. "You broke the rules." I backed away. She stepped forward. Every footstep echoed like thunder, though the carpet should have muffled it. "You let it out," she whispered. "Now it knows you." She raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The hallway behind me was gone, replaced by a mirror. Huge, wall to wall. And in it, I saw everything. Myself, but not quite. The version of me in the mirror was not holding a scalpel. He was holding something else. A key. His eyes were wide, terrified, but he did not move. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not a real smile. A slow, deliberate stretching of skin. My mouth remained closed, but the reflection laughed. No sound, just motion. The girl stepped closer. Her voice came from behind me and from the mirror at the same time. "It likes your face." I turned away from the mirror and ran. I did not know where I was going, only that I had to get away. The hallway twisted as I ran. Doors flickered past. Some were open, some closed. The carpet vanished beneath my feet, replaced by cold tile again. The walls changed color. The ceiling dripped water. The hospital was unraveling. I found a stairwell and descended without thinking. The metal steps groaned under my weight. Every echo bounced around me like a scream. One floor down, then another. No signs. No exit. Only more halls. I stumbled into what looked like the main waiting area. It was deserted. Dust covered the chairs. The reception desk was cracked and broken. There, in the center of the room, was a mirror. The same one. My reflection already waiting. Holding the key. He raised it slowly, then pressed it against the glass. The mirror rippled, and I understood. The only way out was through. But that meant trusting something that wore my face. I stood there, trembling. One hand holding the scalpel, the other slowly reaching for the mirror. It pulsed with cold air drawing me in. My reflection's smile widened. Behind me, the girl whispered again. "You still have to sacrifice." That was the rule. If escape is your only option, be prepared to sacrifice a part of yourself. I took a breath and stepped forward. The moment I stepped into the mirror, the world around me folded inward. There was no sound, no feeling of motion, only a weightless pressure, like I was being pulled through water, that was too still. My body felt numb, my breath caught in my throat, but I never fully lost consciousness, just movement without direction, falling without falling. When my feet touched solid ground again, I almost collapsed. I gasped, feeling the air rush back into my lungs as if I had been holding my breath for hours. The mirror behind me was gone. In its place stood a brick wall, old and cracked, lit by a dim yellow light from a single flickering bulb. I was in a hallway I did not recognize. The floors were concrete, the walls were unfinished, and the ceiling pipes dripped slowly, rhythmically. It was damp, cold. It smelled like rust and mildew. I could hear something in the distance, a rhythmic tapping, something metallic striking stone. I stood still, clutching the scalpel in my left hand, the bandaged right hand hanging uselessly at my side. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I began walking. I had no other choice. Each step echoed around me, louder than it should have been. The hallway branched in strange ways, not like a hospital, more like a maze, doors with no handles, corners that turned into dead ends. And that sound, the tapping, it was getting louder. I reached an old iron gate. Beyond it, the hallway turned to stone, like I was entering the basement of something ancient. I pushed the gate open. It creaked like it had not been touched in years. Inside, the tapping stopped. Then something whispered. It said my name again, but not like before. This time it sounded like it came from inside my own head. James. 1,000 voices, all mine, all slightly wrong. I spun around. No one there. I kept moving. The stone hallway opened into a wide chamber. The walls curved in a perfect circle. Candles lined the perimeter, flickering with a wind I could not feel. In the center stood a figure. Not a person. A shape. Its body was tall, thin, made of smoke and bone. Its face was covered with a mask. Not human, not animal. Something in between. Its limbs were too long, bent at wrong angles. It stood perfectly still, and in its hand it held something familiar. My ID badge. The one I had dropped when the lights went out in the east wing. It lifted its hand slowly, offering it to me. I should have run, but I didn't. I stepped forward. The figure watched me, head tilted in unnatural stillness. It did not breathe. It did not move. I reached for the badge, hand trembling. Then it spoke. Its voice was layered, echoing, like every sound in the world had been put through a filter of pain. You broke the mirror. I blinked. You crossed over. This place is not meant for you. I pulled my hand back. The scalpel felt smaller in my grip, useless. What do you want? I asked, barely able to speak. It tilted its head again. A sacrifice. The final one. I shook my head. I already gave something. I did what the rules said. I got out. It took a step forward. The lights dimmed. The air grew thicker. You gave flesh. We want truth. I did not understand. It gestured behind me. I turned. There was another mirror, this one cracked, foggy, but it still reflected my image. And beside me in the reflection stood the woman from room 7. Her face was still hidden, her grin still stretched too wide, her eyes still bottomless. But now she whispered, "Tell them what you saw. Tell them what you did." I turned away. The creature behind me let out a low growl. The stone beneath my feet began to vibrate. "Tell the truth." The words echoed again. But I didn't know what truth they wanted. I never hurt anyone. I never wanted any of this. I just took a job. I just wanted to prove myself. I'm not like them. Not like who? The creature asked. I looked back at the mirror. Behind me in the reflection, the hospital burned. Flames roared through the windows. And there, in the fire, I saw faces. Dozens of them. Staff, patients, all watching me, all silent. My heart dropped. "What is this?" I whispered. "Memories." But they were not mine. Or maybe they were. One image held longer than the rest. A young boy, strapped to a gurney, screaming. A nurse walking away. And me, standing there, not helping, just watching. I remembered. No, I had buried it. 3 years ago, during my student rotation, that boy had hurt himself, screamed every night. The others called him dangerous, said he liked the pain. They told us to ignore him. And I had. He begged me. I did nothing. I left him alone. He died in the night, and I never told anyone. I dropped to my knees. Tears blurred my vision. "I'm sorry." The creature stepped forward. The girl appeared beside it. "Say it again." "I'm sorry." Louder. I screamed it this time. My voice cracked. I didn't know if it mattered, but I screamed. "I'm sorry." The candles flickered violently. Then one by one, they went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I felt hands on my shoulders. Small, cold. The girl leaned in close. "This is your sacrifice." Then the world turned white. I woke up in the nurse's station. My head was resting on the desk, my right hand bandaged tight, the dried blood stiff against my skin. The lights were on. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs was steady. No flickering, no shadows, no distant whispers. The clock on the wall read 6:15 in the morning. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the second hand ticking forward like it had always been moving, like the night I had just lived through had never happened. But it had. I knew it had. I looked around slowly. The monitors were working again. Room 7 showed nothing but a perfectly made bed. The hallway where I had seen the patient standing motionless was empty. My reflection in the window looked normal, tired, pale, but mine. When I finally stood, my legs were weak but steady. I didn't want to move, but I had to. I made my way through the halls, checking each room, every corner. The windows were all closed. The elevator was still. The east wing lights remained lit. Nothing looked out of place. But everything felt different. When I reached the main entrance, the doors were unlocked. The morning light spilled through the glass, soft and pale, pushing the darkness away like it had never belonged there. I stepped outside and breathed in the cold mountain air. It smelled like pine and frost, real air, clean. I sat on the steps just outside the entrance and looked back at the hospital. The old building stood quiet, no sign of the nightmare that had lived within it just hours ago. I thought of Yuki, how she had tried to warn me, how she had looked afraid even as she handed me the rules. She must have known they were incomplete, or maybe someone had made sure she never saw the full list. I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket. The ink was smudged, and one of the corners was burned slightly, but the rules were still there, 6 of them, and the one I had discovered the hard way. Rule 7. Do not enter room 7 after 2 a.m. I stared at the words, letting the weight of everything crash down onto me. The rules had not been jokes. They had been lifelines. Not all of them made sense. Some still didn't. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty now. Breaking a rule had consequences, and following them had saved my life. At 7 sharp, the front doors opened behind me. I turned to see the morning shift arriving, chatting quietly among themselves. They nodded to me like it was any normal day. Maybe for them it was. Minerva was among them. She looked different in the daylight, more human, less ageless. She paused when she saw me sitting there, then approached slowly. "You made it," she said, a hint of something like relief in her voice. I stood up, unsure what to say. "You knew," I said. "You knew the rules weren't complete." She nodded. "Yes, but I had hoped you wouldn't need that last one." I almost died. Most do, she replied softly. Most don't make it to morning. I wanted to be angry, to yell at her, but the rage never came, only exhaustion. I saw something, I said, in that other place. Memories. Not mine, but also mine. She looked at me carefully, then placed a hand on my shoulder. The building takes what you hide. It brings it out, makes you face it. It was my fault, I whispered. That boy. I did nothing. And you carried that with you, she said, whether you admitted it or not. I stared at the ground. Did the sacrifice work? She nodded once. You're still here. I didn't understand it all, maybe I never would. But I had lived through it, and I had paid the price. Minerva handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was payment, more than I expected, but money felt meaningless now. You'll get offers after this, she said. Quiet ones, specific ones. You'll have a choice. What if I say no? Then you walk away, try to forget. But the ones who see, they don't usually forget. I didn't know what to say. I tucked the envelope into my bag and walked to my car. Before I got in, I looked back at the hospital one last time. It was just a building again. But I knew better. It was watching me. Waiting. I drove home in silence, the rising sun warming my skin through the windshield. Every mile between me and that place felt like a small victory. When I got home, I washed the blood from my hand and threw the scrubs away. I sat on my couch for hours, just breathing, just being alive. Later that night, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. We heard you survived your first night. Then another message. There's more work if you're interested. I stared at the screen. My hands trembled. I did not reply. Not yet. But I kept the phone close. Because some part of me knew the truth. Once you see what's really out there, you can never go back.